Okay, it's Monday, November 24th, about 7:40 p.m. I'll call the meeting of the City of Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Sammons?
Yes. Here, I'm sorry.
I'm
here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Mr. Madigan? Ms. Marlin?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe?
Here.
Mayor Pressing?
Here.
And are there any additions to the agenda, I think? Oh, Charlie.
Yeah, there are two items to insert after public input that are sort of part of public input, and that would be a presentation by the Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District, and then a report from Dennis and I, and possibly the mayor, on our sister city visit to Thionville, France.
Okay. And then I had one from Eric to add number 12, discussion of IHSA support. Any other additions? Okay, staff reports. Do we want to do the presentation first, or are there other staff reports? Okay. Rick Manor, you want to do your presentation for the Champaign-Urbana Sanitary District?
I was just going to do the two reports out. Doesn't matter.
We should do
What do you
public
want to do?
input first.
Yeah, I thought so.
Were you wanting to do public input?
Okay, Charlie said to put it after staff report. Okay. What do you want to do? You want to do minutes and then?
Yeah, let's just
okay.
approve the minutes.
Approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes of October 27th, 2014?
Nope.
If not, is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Motion by Robert, second by Marlin. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, minutes of November 3rd, the special meeting of the Committee of the Whole.
Move approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Ammons, second by Roberts. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay.
You see.
Presentation?
Let's go.
Okay, presentation by Rick Manor. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being given this opportunity to give you an update on what we're doing over at the Sanitary District. The last update that you were given was back in 2007. It was before our rather large construction project that we're calling the 2010 update for the Northeast plant. Today I'll give you a quick overview of what the district is and what we're doing. Also talk to you about what we're calling the 2nd Street Pump Station project. Cronus Chemicals has been in the news a little bit, so I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update in regards to our involvement with that. And also there was a short newspaper article in regards to possible connection down to Philo, and I wanted to update you on that as well. For background, we are the Urbana and Champaign Sanitary District, so we cover both communities plus Savoy. Also, Bonneville is recently tied on to the sanitary sewers, and there are a number of unincorporated subdivisions as well. So our service population is 145,000. We have 50 full-time employees. We've been off the tax roll since the 1980s, so all of our income comes either in the form of user charges, which is a bi-monthly bill on a per-gallon rate, or essentially developer impact fees that we term construction permit fees and interceptor cost recovery fees. On a numbers basis, what those are is the typical user bill for a typical homeowner is about $26 a month. Of that, about half of that money comes to the sanitary district, but the other half for an Urbana resident does come back to the city in the form of fees for both the sanitary sewer maintenance and the stormwater utility fee. So basically, we're your billing agent for those two charges. And so the bill that the homeowner sees, about half and half is going between us and to you guys. Our rates have been going up at about 3% a year for for the last several years and will go on already by ordinance through 2016. Our impact fee on new development for a single-family home is about $2,000. That's a one-time fee at the beginning of the development, but thereafter, all of our income comes from user charges. The most visible assets that we own are our treatment plants. This is the one in Champaign at Windsor and Rising Road. It serves South and West Champaign, Savoy, and Bonneville. It was awarded the Best Operated Plant of the Year in 2010 by IEPA, so we're very proud of that. In fact, there's 180 treatment plants in our size category, and we were #1 in 2010. Our Northeast plant is over here in Urbana behind Ambucks Park. It's our original plant. We just had the 90th birthday for our trickling filters just last Friday. In 1924 is when they started up operation, and they've been working like champs ever since. It has a capacity of about 17 million gallons a day. It serves all of Urbana, most of the U of I, and the balance of Champaign that isn't served by the Southwest plant. And it was just nominated for being Plant of the Year this year. So we got 2 plants, and both of them in a 5-year window are considered top-notch by IEPA. There's 5 plants that are nominated, so we don't know who wins until next year. In terms of what we do, one of the things that is very important to our operations is the sanitary sewer system, that the sanitary sewers are an asset that is just as valuable as the very visible treatment plants. This is a simplified view that I stole from a presentation that City of Champaign gave in regards to the July 12th storms. And so this shows all of the details of what's going on underground. I'm going to simplify it and just put some big arrows here and blot out the storm sewers for the moment. So as you guys are well aware, the homeowner owns the service connection from their house all the way out to the public sewer. You have an important and very useful rebate program to help people pay for construction when it goes underneath right-of-way. It's a very good idea. For your information, the origins of the definition of it being a private service all the way out to the street actually goes back to the origins of the Clean Water Act. That US EPA set up that decision, and it's the most common decision across the country, that it is typical for it to be the homeowners all the way out to the public sewer that runs along the street. From there, you go into an Urbana city sewer, the sewers that you guys maintain. From there, it goes into the, several city sewers combined together. It gets into a larger sewer. That's when we take over ownership. We call those interceptor sewers. And, of course, we have our 2 treatment plants. By the numbers here, there's about 11,000 home connections out there that are served by about 100 miles of sewers that you guys maintain, which are connected to about 90 miles of interceptors that we maintain going on to our 2 treatment plants. I include all of those things in the sanitary sewer system, and in addition to that, I'll throw in the Urbana storm sewer system as an important part of the sanitary sewer's effectiveness, because if you don't get the storm water out via the storm sewers, it tends to accumulate in the sanitary sewers, causing us problems. And so I want to give you guys special thanks for remembering to maintain this important infrastructure. It's not very glitzy, but it's very important for you to continue to maintain this even during hard times, and we appreciate the fact that you guys have done that, even with the recession and all of the financial problems that have been ongoing. The combination of this system, the combination of the homeowners, the cities, and the sanitary district system keeps out 97 to 99% of the storm water from the sanitary sewer system. Only a small fraction of it leaks into the sanitary sewer system, but that leakage does have a significant impact. But I want to emphasize the fact that we do a very good job of keeping out the storm water. It's just that small fraction is just so large that it ends up having an impact. So it's, we're pretty darn effective, but we're not perfect at it. And that's gets especially challenging during storms, such as the most recent challenge was on July 12, where we had about 4 inches of rain come down, and the worst part of that storm came at the tail end of it, and that causes us great challenges at the sanitary district. So to understand what goes on during storms, you have to start with that same graphic and look at the sanitary end of thing. A typical household produces about 15 gallons an hour of sewage. And on a nice dry day, we see 15 gallons an hour coming from each house. But when there's a storm, just 1 inch of rain produces about 3,000 gallons of rainwater on a typical eighth acre lot. So on a very relatively small lot, we see 3,000 gallons of water hitting the system. In the idealized world, all 3,000 gallons end up in the storm sewer system or getting absorbed by the earth. Unfortunately, as storms go on, and they go on hour after hour, and after we get inch after inch of rain, the ground gets saturated, and so the ground stops absorbing that water and that rainwater, and that's when we start to see some real challenges. And so what you see, what happened on like a July 12th type storm, 60 gallons per hour added to the sanitary sewer system. And so 29, 40 were going out the right way, 60 was only leaking into the sanitary sewer. But because of the relative magnitude of those numbers, that 60 gallons per hour quintupled the flow going into the sanitary sewer system, and so we saw 5 times as much flow at our treatment plant, causing us great challenges. And so that's what's going on during storm events. It's a small fraction of the stormwater that's getting into the sanitary sewer system, but it causes a great effect. And that's why we're such strong advocates for another program that you guys participate in called the Overhead Sewer Program, which is essentially a pumped connection from households. That any household built since the 1990s has this, but older homes do not always have it. And by having a pumped connection, the house is pushing the sewage out from their lower, from the basement and other below-grade structures. And with that, they have absolute protection from stormwater backing up into their household, or at least as absolute as we can manage. And that type of household rarely has any sewer backups that causes damages into the house. And that's why it is the recommended way to go. It's the only way homes built since the 90s are built. And you and we participate in the rebate program to encourage older homes to do that, and we strongly advocate people consider it. Basically, I suggest before you put down a couple $1,000s of home theater equipment, invest in your sewer system first. It just makes sense. In regards to our 2nd Street pump station, I'm going to take you back in time a little bit. And the background in this drawing is a 1920s era planning document for the sanitary district, planning the sanitary sewer systems. And they were expecting the campus area population to be about 10,000 people. And with that planning document, they said, you know what, we need 2 major interceptors crossing from Champaign into Urbana, and that'll take us very well into the 1960s. Well, they ended up having to build 2 more, making it 4 interceptors through there, but those are the 4 interceptors that are serving all of the parts of both downtowns and campus town that are crossing through those towns. And so you notice the youngest one of those sewers is coming up on its 60th birthday. So we've got one of them that's over 115 years old already, and the youngest one is coming up on Social Security availability. So unfortunately, what's happened over the years has been that we've all been building bigger and more flow has been going through that area. The areas not even on the map are going through that area. And there's an awful lot of tall buildings going up in that area, including your campus circle and a couple of other developments. And so those 4 sewers are asking for help, and they really need it. And so what we ended up doing, rather than building a 5th sewer through that area, what we started on is what we're calling our 2nd Street pump station. It's going to be a pump station located around 2nd and Springfield. And from that, we're going to clean out the 4 interceptors that are going through campus and remove the work that they've picked up on from Champaign and take it over to our southwest plant. So we'll build a new interceptor on the west end of that box, heading southward and then over towards our southwest plant. By cleaning out the work that they have gotten from the west side of the railroad tracks, they're essentially creating that 5th interceptor by making space for sewage from the campus area. Here's Scott Park, and we'll be off in the parking lot to the west of Scott Park. That yellow box is one possible location. It might be somewhere else in that area. Here's a graphic of the whole project. As I said, the project is going to redirect flow from Marketplace, Craft, Hessel Park, and all the areas west of the railroad tracks. It's going to only cost about $6 million, maybe $8 million. We'll see what the actual budget comes in. It avoids the most built-up parts of campus and the very difficult construction that would be if we had to put that 5th sewer through there. I know that perhaps building a sewer right past Carl might be fun for some people, but I didn't want to do it. So of the benefits of this project is it reduces downstream sewer problems. At Urbana, for example, right now, when our 1956 interceptor crosses Crystal Lake Park, it's challenged during large storm events. And sometimes we do have overflows. And so by reducing the sewage in that line, we hope to have fewer backups along those lines. And there are other additional benefits we can talk about if you want during question and answer. The next subject I wanted to go into was Cronus Chemicals. And here's the basic numbers on them. They're a $1 billion fertilizer plant, a couple hundred permanent jobs, a couple thousand construction jobs. The parts where we got involved started in January of 2013. In June of 2013, we agreed to the idea of selling effluent. In March of this year, we agreed to the specific contract terms. The most important terms are that we would own and operate everything from our Southwest plant in towards town. They would be building in the pipeline, and then anything that was out of either Champaign or Urbana. The typical rate of flow would be about 6 million gallons a day would be how much they would purchase from us. However, a very important provision is that we control that volume number. If we need to reduce it, we can. Our rate would be about $1,000 per million gallons, or $1 per 1,000 gallons, in whichever way you want to look at it. A very important provision is that we would be getting a letter of credit at the front end of construction. Before I spend any real money, we would have a letter of credit guaranteeing that if everything were to fall apart, the ratepayers wouldn't be endangered. And that's been an important provision from the beginning of our discussions with Cronus, is we wanted to absolutely protect the ratepayers, and I think we've done that very well. The contract is binding on future owners, and it's only applicable to a fertilizer plant. Mayor Pressing, you came to our meeting in May of 2013. You suggested we think long-term, and we do have a 20-year contract there because I wanted to assure you everything we do at the sanitary district, we're always thinking 20 years is sort of a short-term time window for us, that we build everything in the 50 to 100-year window is what we're looking at. It's just the right way to go with utilities, if you can. A potential new term is we are investigating the possibility of perhaps owning that pipeline, the 20-mile pipeline connecting our Southwest plant down to Tuscola. I recently discovered that state revolving loan fund money could be used for that, and so we are considering whether we wanted to be involved in the ownership of that pipeline. Similar to the first part of this contract, the only way we would get involved is if it is actually in the best interest of the ratepayers, and we wouldn't risk that in any negotiations we work on. In regards to why we do this idea of selling our effluent, for those of us that have a few gray hairs, you recognize the green triangle is the recycling triangle, and the three parts of that are very important. Reduce and reuse come above recycling. And when you're talking water and wastewater, reducing is very simple. Just don't use so much water, we get reductions. Recycling is very simple also. We do it for you at the sanitary district. We charge you for it, but we do all the recycling of the water that we can. Reusing is the middle leg of those three, and it's usually ignored because it doesn't really happen very often that there's anybody who wants to reuse our sewage in any form. Because of the trace pollutants that are still associated with it, there's a very limited market. And this is one of those rare birds where actually somebody does want to pay for our treated wastewater, and that's why we're working on that. The most important reason why the sale makes an awful lot of sense is we're matching the lower grade use, which is an industrial application for water, with a lower grade water being our treated water. Our treated water is good, but it's only good enough to go into a creek or to go into an industry. It's not Muhammad Aquifer water, and that's what we're protecting. If we weren't selling the effluent to Cronus, there's a very good likelihood they'd be using Muhammad Aquifer water, increasing the demand on the aquifer by 6 million gallons a day. And so I'm very pleased that one of the major benefits of this contract is that we won't be tapping the aquifer for that 6 million gallons a day. There's additional reasons why I think this is a very good idea, and I'll be happy to go into those in greater detail later if you want during the question and answer. Financially, this is absolutely going to be good for the ratepayers. We're talking about at least $1 million per year benefit to the local ratepayers, and every dollar that I get out of Cronus is a dollar I don't have to take out of our local ratepayers. And so that makes it an awful lot of good news for everybody as far as I'm concerned. And then I just wanted to highlight for you very briefly a couple upcoming challenges. The Illinois Nutrient Loss Strategy is coming out. If it hasn't come out earlier today, it'll probably be coming out later this week. It's going to highlight what the state's going to be doing on nutrients, which is a topic that's very important to us as sanitary districts. In addition to that, we're likely to see much tighter ammonia limits in our treatment plant. It turns out while fish are somewhat sensitive to ammonia, mussels are even 2 to 3 times more sensitive, and so our ammonia limits are going to be likely going down. And excess flow is always a subject for sanitary districts to be talking about, and I can again talk about that more in questions if you wish. One other comment, our board is here. If you wanted to talk to our board members, we did call a special meeting so that we can have open discussion between the council and the board. If that was desirable, I will answer any questions you want to direct at me as well, of course.
Thank you. Any questions for Rick? Diane?
It's not so much a question as a comment. I wanted to thank you for your careful stewardship of our sewage, and I mean that with all sincerity. I was really happy to be able to go to the open house that you held, was it 2 years ago?
Yes, we've had it now a couple years in a row.
Okay, and I hope you have them again, because it's an area that most people don't visit, but when we were in China last year, we visited some luxurious sanitary plants, actually, and ours compares very favorably. But I would encourage the public to visit the sanitary plant and see this part of our infrastructure that's usually out of sight, but it certainly makes life better in this city. So, thanks.
Thanks for coming to the open house. It was appreciated, the interest from everybody. And although we don't have the most luxurious plants, we do have modern state-of-the-art plants that we spend the money on the tech and the gadgets, not necessarily on the luxury.
Other questions? Eric?
So I'm a total novice in this area, but so this may be a stupid question, but I read an article in Scientific American that made me think that maybe a large part of why we don't reuse wastewater is more sociological than it is actually scientific, and that it could potentially, in a cost-effective way, be cleaned up to be used for anything. Is that, do I have the wrong impression on that, or is that correct?
There's a couple things that go with that. There is certainly a psychological factor, but it's actually also a practical matter too. That when I was in school back in the 80s, Professor Snoyinks was a leader in the drinking water field, and he always reminded everybody the first rule in drinking water is you start with your best source possible, and then you make it better. And that what you do in drinking water is look at multiple barriers between yourself and any potential disease or pollution. And so starting with a wastewater that you know was polluted just a few hours ago violates that basic idea. Mm-hmm. So for me, I would be least inclined towards using wastewater as a resource for drinking water unless I were on a spaceship where I had no other options. Mm-hmm. If I can find anything else, I would start with that and work to make that better and work with my money to make that better in the first place. So what I think is very appropriate is to where that's not the standard that you're needing to aim for, to use wastewater to fill in those needs, exactly what we're doing with Cronus, that since they don't need it from a health standpoint, they're just evaporating the water. Using a lower grade water makes an awful lot of sense for that type of application. The main reason it doesn't get used in a lot of industrial applications is really economics. It costs $500,000 to put in a mile of pipe. And so the number of industries that are interested in our water is relatively limited, and the ones that could use a quantity to pay for the pipe is almost zero, and other than Cronus has been zero for a number of years.
Carol?
I just want to ask, I think you just touched on it a little bit, but the Cronus deal, does the fact that you all did that deal save us money on our rates going up, everybody's? So it keeps the sanitary district from raising its rates?
We are currently in a set of years where we already have committed to raising our rates by 3% a year through 2016. I can't undo that because it's a loan requirement. In addition to that, we've been equally hit very hard by the recession as well, and so I'm not going to guarantee no rate increases, but I will guarantee the basic premise that since we're a government agency who's not making money, every dollar that I get out of Cronus is a dollar I'm not taking out of the local ratepayers, and so it will forestall rate increases to that $1 million a year benefit. So that $1 million will not be coming out of the local ratepayers, and that is pretty substantial. That's about 8% of our income in a year is $1 million. We're about a $12 million a year operation, so that's 8% that I don't have to get out. So that's an 8% avoided rate increase. So not no increases, just fewer increases.
And then you mentioned that the reuse of the treated wastewater from Cronus, its purpose is to do what with that?
It's primarily cooling their equipment. The natural gas is an input into modern fertilizer production, and so to keep their equipment cool, they evaporate a lot of water, and so that's all that. That's the 80% of the water that they will be purchasing from us is just going to go up as steam.
I also, my family went to this tour as well, and it was fascinating. I think if you want to teach children not to waste water, even adults like myself, you should probably take the tour on the next open house. So,
Charlie.
Two things. I assume everybody knows the three members of the Sanitary District Board who are here is Jerry Like and Deanna Linick and Jenny Putnam back there. I get everybody's name right there? Yeah. So they're sitting out there. Jerry and I were on a board many years ago. We won't discuss that one. Oh, it was not a fond memory, right, Jerry? No, yeah, it's not a fond memory. Anyway, so the question after you touched on it. You know, industries that could use this water. I'd really love to be able to have more industries use the water, even potentially another step in there before it gets to the creek. I know that it's important for the creeks, and I know people downstream are using it for their drinking water. There are things that happen, biologically to this stuff so that they can use it as drinking water. Are there some more sales out there that we could encourage?
Typically in more arid communities, the community supports the reuse and subsidizes it. And I have difficulties advocating that here because we're not an arid community. And so I've questioned myself in regards to that, and I haven't come up with the idea that ratepayers are that interested in doing it such that I would encourage it via subsidy, such as us paying for the pipes to go down there. And we're not doing that with Cronus. The Cronus is paying for that pipeline going all the way down there, in addition to them paying us for the water itself. And so that's where I am right now, that in this climate, I don't think that we should be pushing it that hard. If anybody's interested, I'm more than happy to do it at a relatively low cost, and to be as low cost as we can. But I don't think it should be money that comes out of our current ratepayers to do that. And unfortunately, that really does limit it, since we're often on the edges of communities. Our Southwest plant is so far out there that we built out on the edge to not impact local homes, and of course development has come around it, but it's been mostly residential development. Our Northeast plant, we have a few options because we do have the industrial park right nearby. And so if they were interested in some amount of flow, we'd at least be willing to talk to them about it. We talked to Scott Tess a little bit about perhaps the parks being interested in a little bit of reusing of our water. But the fraction, we're processing 20 million gallons per day. And so the fraction that will go by that is going to usually be quite small. Cronus is a very unique animal. It's that when I did looking for equivalent deals, really there's very few in the Midwest. I think the nearest one that's of a similar size is all the way in central Wisconsin, a power plant that's purchasing about 6 million gallons a day. Enid, Oklahoma has a fertilizer plant that's going to potentially reuse 5 million gallons a day. It's pretty unusual to have it like this. There's a couple golf courses that are irrigated with it in the summer months, that's a somewhat common application, but that's also very limited to golf courses that are right near the wastewater plant.
I have a question or comment. I was at a conference last week, and it had those lightning talks where people talk for like 3 minutes. And
Yep.
one of them was, do sanitary sewer new sanitary sewer plants create greater economic development than airports? Unfortunately, that one was canceled, and that was like one of the 10 that, that I really wanted to see. So I just kind of wondered if you knew the answer to that one.
Yes.
I had a feeling that might be the answer because I used to live in Champaign, and in the 80s, I used to ride my bike out that way, and you would go by miles and miles of cornfields, and you can't do that anymore. You go by houses, and then you're at the sewage plant. So that probably is pretty demonstrative of.
Yes, a great way to encourage urban renewal is to build a wastewater plant, and then people really want to build houses right next to it for some reason. I don't understand that, but it seems to be true. But to more seriously answer your general question, there's an awful lot of industry. When the sanitary district was created in the 1920s, they commented that the creeks that served the community could handle about 1,000 people. And then after that, they were over-polluting the creek, and they knew it. And so they voted into the existence of the sanitary district because it is a necessary part for urban life. And so that's a more complete answer as to if you want urban life and this level of density, you really need a wastewater plant. The airport helps, but is not nearly as essential.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, the mayor.
Okay, so before there was the sanitary district, who built that 1898, whatever it was, pipe?
They recognized the displeasure of having sewage in the streets, and so they built a pipe going to the creek to get rid of it by just dumping it into the creek.
Was that the city of Urbana? Or
I believe both cities had their own systems, and actually they did do a little of experimentation before the sanitary district. They put essentially a gargantuan septic tank on the end of it to try and do a little bit of treatment. That was tried in 1897 or so, and so that's when that sewer first got in there. But basically there was no real good treatment. They just put it into the creek to get it out of town. And I think the residents of St. Joe didn't like that very much. Just a guess.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Eric? Nope.
Well, I guess I was just going to make a brief comment that it seems to me that our plans for possible industrial development on the north side of town,
Yes.
which will be, facilitated by the continuation of Lincoln Avenue. That area would be within pretty good, pretty easy reach of your plant on the north side of town. Would it not?
Relatively short distance, but remember my price tag there for the pipe is about $500,000 a mile. So just 5 miles away, somebody has to come up with $2.5 million for the pipe to get there. And that's what usually kills the idea of wastewater reuse, is because they already have a drinking water connection, and just making that pipe a little bit bigger costs them almost nothing. And so that upfront cost is usually the killer. That realistically, I'm more looking at the industrial park to the east, immediately right east of our treatment plant, as being the most likely viable candidate for that type of application. So it just hurts too much to build a long pipeline.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have a Sister City report.
No, I wanted to let all the other public go first was the idea,
okay.
and then
So
we'll do ours at the end.
We'll do public input next. So I have 2 people that wanted to talk. First was Michael Langendorf on the IHSA contributions.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Michael Langendorf. I live in southeast Urbana in Ward 6, 1508 Trails Drive. I was just concerned in opening the newspaper up and reading about us not supporting, seeking out the IHSA state basketball championship back here. It seemed like a very small investment in trying to attract that business to our community. I think it was a huge loss, and we lost that in Champaign-Urbana on 2 levels. One is to expose people to University of Illinois, so people came down to watch the games, as well as the kids coming down. But when I was growing up, it was the goal of every kid to play basketball, to play at Huff in those days, and then the Assembly Hall. And I think we lost that. And it seems to me that it's a small investment to make to work with our sister communities, with Savoy and Champaign, to entice them to come back. And it seems like we get a good return on our money if we were able to do that, both for our restaurants, our hotels, our businesses, for us to be back here in town. And I think it was a very poor decision not to be involved in that.
Thank you. Any questions for Michael? Next, I have Naomi Jacobson to speak on IHSA basketball.
Good evening. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the council and Madam Mayor. I was absolutely stunned when I saw in the News Gazette that the decision was made not to put any kind of investment in the IHSA bringing back and the communities bringing back the basketball tournaments here. From what I understand, it's first of all, it's putting your name down saying I support this. The city would support it, bringing this back, and saying approximately, how much money the city would be willing to put into this. But my understanding is that the city doesn't even pay anything into this until the tournaments come here. So if they don't come, it's not like there's money been put in some depository and it's not going to get it back. This would be a way of participating with the other communities here. Let's get Urbana to participate with Champaign and Savoy and the University of Illinois. This is very important to everybody in this district, in this area, and I really believe that it's a very poor decision, and I would hope that the mayor would listen. Well, I mean, I haven't talked to all the council members, but I would hope that it would be a council discussion and not just a unilateral decision without even talking to other people on the council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I have Carol McCusick.
Carol McCusick, 1907 North Cunningham. Thank you for letting me talk about this same thing all over again. I still don't think I got it right because I want to say that it is my opinion. It was not your decision. You decided something different. But it is my opinion that both of the businesses that are going to operate that may be coming online on Saline Court up north, I think it's Lincoln Avenue, should be have what preparation for that the state decides is advisable for construction and demolition recycling facility. Okay, but so that's one thing, but technically I think the recycled asphalt shingle could open its doors, but that's why it's good to write down this number, the EPA field office 278, that's 217-278-5800. And you could double check anything with them. But when you call, also when you call the recycle asphalt shingle, it's called Southwind. If it opens, you could call them and they ought to tell you, if you have a load, they ought to tell you it has to be, whether it has to be absolutely pure, because they can't take any construction and demolition waste. And then you could check on them by calling the EPA field office number I just gave. And because the people at the field office will know also know about the changing rules on construction and demolition waste, which is the other complicating factor right now. The bill that has to do with it, and I would like to know more about it, I'd like to know more about what the public should think should happen around construction and demolition, and also I think it should be handled like a pollution control facility. I think that's the name for it, and have like a process, like you have like planning processes that probably has initial. No, it doesn't. It should have initial intake, but like a linear process. People know where they can participate in it. Oh, like say if they didn't call ahead to Southwind, they knew they were a truck had some dirt in their load of shingle. You don't want them going even to the area if they're not going to be able to be received there. So they should call first. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a Sister City presentation by Charlie and Dennis.
See if the technology works here. Good. I'll get us started.
So as you know, while we're bringing this up, the city of Urbana's got 3 sister cities currently, and our newest one was established by ordinance on July 14th of this year, and it is with Thionville, France. We sent our first delegation to that community this last weekend. From the 15th to the 17th, we had celebrations that we participated in at their request. The mayor led the party with Charlie and I went, other members of the community, and you'll see their photographs. So we're going to go up.
So a number of us arrived by bullet train, hour and 35 minutes from the city of Paris to basically the border with Luxembourg and Germany. Coming out of the train station, the first thing you see is an old section of the city, about a 7-block by 7-block area that is pedestrian only with some parking at the edges. And you can see there's signs on the road to Luxembourg and spots in Germany. It's sort of a fun. They refer to themselves as the 3 borders area. Prominent, of course, is the Moselle River. This is in the Moselle region of France. And here the mayor and I, on arrival, took a quick walk down the river. The area is also served extensively by commuter trains to Metz, and slower trains to Paris as well as to Luxembourg. The nice path along the river turns into a trail out of town for bikes, and that goes both directions along the river. Here's the roundabout at night, and about this time we wandered into the into this commercial corridor. It's very walkable, walking only. And then, just to remind you, this is what it looked like at the end of World War II. And so you'll see some comparisons.
Yeah, most of our time was spent in what you call the historic downtown. It was a rather typical sort of medieval layout for the city, and they've converted it into beautiful enclosed walks, not enclosed walks, but plazas and limited traffic areas. It was just a wonderful pedestrian-friendly place.
Yeah, note the trolley tracks and the clock tower in the background. You'll see the clock tower later.
Yeah. So actually, I missed this part of the thing. So tell them, Charlie, what's going on.
Right, yeah. So on our arrival, their mayor, Mayor Anne Gramersch, met us at City Hall, and there was a brief reception, so to speak, in a formal reception area. where the mayor signed, I believe, a guest book, right? Was that, I forget what it was. Yeah, a guest book. And there was, of course, a reception. Kermit Harden was one of the honored guests, part of our delegation, along with his son Andy and wife Ann, which will show up in a moment. Of course, every event includes food. So we were well fed, and I will note that we traveled on our own dime, but then we were hosted by them, picking up the tab for our 3-day visit for most of the expenses. In the Saturday morning, Dennis and I made a quick run through their farmers market, and lots of very interesting things. Here's just meat hanging from the truck. I think our public health district would probably have a nuclear meltdown if they saw this kind of stuff. They give new meaning to food trucks. This is a food delicatessen on wheels.
Yeah, it's like 25 feet long or something.
Yeah, and about 200 varieties of cheeses in there, if not more. There are about 400 varieties of cheeses that you can get in France. Fresh vegetables, fresh fish. There were fresh mussels, fresh flowers, fresh sausages, and other preserved meats. Of course, there was plenty of bread to be had. I made another trip to the cheese counter.
Charlie likes cheese.
Yeah, and of course, then adjoining the square is
Church.
yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember if that's a Catholic church, but there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So we're looking at a little bit of the downtown. That's the kind of famous clock tower. Originally, it was the foundation was dedicated like in 1200, like Charlemagne era, but it's got a Baroque top to it. It's been rebuilt a couple times. The city had extensive work on advertising the events for the weekend, and actually this is a regional event, not just the city of Jonesville, but the entire Moselle Valley and all the associated hamlets and all the associations. They have reenacting and reenactors groups. So here's one of the
Yeah, this was sort of like the
signs.
culmination of a week-long event that was for recognizing the 70th anniversary of the
liberation.
the liberation of this area of France by Patent and the other parts of the army that went through there.
Yeah. So there's their city building, elegant building that used to be a nunnery. And during the French Revolution, the nuns were kicked out, and it's now a city municipal building. Here's our group, and it's just about to take off on a walking tour of the city in the morning on Saturday morning.
So the rest of the delegation can be seen here. We have the mayor and Dennis, as well as John Dimmitt, Mayor Reverend Evelyn Underwood, Kermit Harden, not pictured, but you'll see him later, Michael Kilcullen, Ann Harden, and Andy Harden as well. I think that's the 9 members of the delegation.
Yeah, a really great mix of people representing the city. So these are some of the streets.
We got a tour of the city, and of course another food
You
stop.
just go by these stores and you just stop in awe. You usually look at what's available to the shoppers.
This is one of the famous bakeries in Thionville, and the owner came out to greet Kermit. She's the daughter of the. She's the current owner and family member, descended. It's 2 or 3 generations of a famous bakery here, and she was thrilled with meeting us. And then Stefan. This is the gentleman who organized everything on that end. He is one of the members of the council. Their system is 41 members of their council in
Yeah.
some level. Anyway, Stefan always has a smile on his face. He procured a number of chocolate croissants for us. Everybody's enjoying them as we get on a bus for our next tour. And then he shows up with fresh baguette, and it was warm and very tasty.
Oh, so then after our tour, we went up to a fort, and I was sort of expecting to see classic star-shaped fort on the hill. But this was part of the German-built Maginot Line that, because Thionville was occupied by Germany and this building was built in 1901, it's an underground fortification with a lot of tunnels and underground passages. Not a very attractive place, and probably a very depressing place to be stationed during the war. And ultimately, it was actually never used because there wasn't actually a battle from that direction. But these are machinery pieces that are still in operation. They started up one of the generators. Pretty impressive.
And of course, another food event. There was a reception here, and there's Stefan handing out food again.
Yeah.
And here's a picture of a long hallway. This is the outside. This is just one part of the series of buildings built into the side of the mountain.
Yeah, it's kind of honeycombed. So then we actually went to the local cemetery, or they call it necropolis, and here they have the graves of soldiers from various nationalities that were killed during the war.
Both wars.
Yeah, World War I and World War II. Mm-hmm. And the ceremony here was to lay a wreath of remembrance. So first we saw the mayor of Thionville, and then we saw our mayor and Mr. Hardin laying another wreath. So here's a group. Here's part of the cemetery. After which, we had to have lunch. And we went to, we were taken to this fantastic restaurant. And here, the delicacy was regional, and it was casseroles with kind of scalloped potatoes, and amazingly enough, with fish and scalloped potatoes, and also wild boar meat and scalloped potatoes, a regional delicacy, and we had Moselle wine. And there was an interview by their local television station.
They have a UPTV station called Mirabel, which I believe has 6 channels.
6 channels of views, can you imagine? Then it became time for the arrival of the Moselle reenactors, the Moselle River reenactors. So groups of volunteers from the different communities nearby have maintained the vehicles from the World War II and costumes and uniforms, and they created a reenactment in front of the bridge, which is a reenactment of the arrival of the Americans and as they're going into Germany. It included all kinds of fun explosives, and was a big event, very popular. A huge crowd came out, a really big crowd came out.
Another group shot. And then that evening we went to the Sister City signing ceremony.
Right, and this was to honor not only Mr. Hardin and he received here, he's receiving an award or a medal from the city, and then the mayor spoke in French, addressed the community, and
we had a great deal of fun translating. The woman in red mural did her best to translate from what was written down or from just what she remembered what was said. And Kermit had written remarks. Mayor Anne Romersch had her remarks written down, I think both in French and English, I'm not sure. And then Laurel's was a little more challenging, I believe.
And you'll notice that also standing there with a colored scarf is Elise Polier. That she's the first woman that first approached us to become a Sister City program. She was an invaluable friend during and accompanied us throughout the entire weekend, just like Stefan Mokals.
Yeah, Kermit gave a great little speech. And I believe there was a good joke in there too that he told.
He said it was a pleasure to come back to Thionville after 70 years, and not worry about being shot at.
The signing of the actual Sister City documents in large form, and this went across great. Thanks to Public Works for providing a nice sign. This was done and taken over, and it'll be interesting to see where they put it.
Yeah, it's a similar sign to our sister city of Zomba, but this meets the traffic parameters of the signs in France, and it's in French, and it says Ville jumelée avec Urbana, which is twin city of Urbana, Illinois.
And they applied us with some gifts, and afterwards, and this is Reverend Underwood having a laugh with the mayor. Sunday, our last day, involved a review of troops and volunteers and flag bearers. There were 450 flag bearers, and the usual Army bands, procession of government and military officials coming in. This is one of the local generals awarding several of the
Legion of Honor?
Legion of Honor.
And others.
The Legion of Honor medals to two veterans. One of the veterans was like, I think, 93. The other was 90 years old. And three local, three currently serving officers in the military. There was a U.S. honor guard as part of the group as well. This was, of course, followed by a parade. We got to sit in the stands with the mayor and other dignitaries, and the reenactors came through. John Dimmitt, or it looks like John Dimmitt, managed to sneak off and score a motorcycle there, we think. I got to ask him if that really is him on there. It just looks like him.
So yes, the French have a sense of national pride that seems to exceed what I've seen locally very often. They also love to sing their national anthem, and it's singable, and it's quite a good tune too. So a lot of parading. Again, the ceremony continues. This is all a military ceremony this morning on Sunday.
And this is two American veterans, and I think the third is a Frenchman. I'm not sure who.
Can you tell by the clothing who's the Frenchman? I wonder. This lady is wonderful. There's a story that when the Allied troops came across and began to enter Thionville, one of the first people to see them was a 12-year-old young gal who had been told by her parents that she had to go out and dig out all the potatoes before anything happened, because that's what they're going to eat for the rest of the month. And there's a photograph of her in the field as the tanks are coming into town. This woman is still alive, and she spoke about her reminiscences during the conference in the Sunday afternoon.
Then we had a chance to get out in the countryside. We had a couple hours off in the afternoon, and another Stefan took us for a nice ride, and we got to visit a restored castle that was from the Duke of Marlborough's time. And this is what it looked like before it was restored. It took 10 years of rebuilding, and you can see they put the roofs back on. The tile is slate from a quarry nearby in Germany, and I'm not sure what happened there.
And it's a lesson in historic preservation and what can happen if you have the energy to do it.
Now this is a view of the village down below the castle, and some pictures inside. It was a lot of fun to visit.
Yeah, it was actually converted into a children's kind of science museum and game display facility.
So the festivities ended with a performance from the Air Force band in Europe, jazz band in Europe. They were touring various parts of France, Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands as part of the 70th anniversary.
And it happened to be that Thionville was their first stop on their tour, and they specialized in Glenn Miller.
And I discovered that Dennis Roberts can really dance.
And these are our very good friends, Elise Bollier and Stefan. They were our wonderful hosts, and now I know that they've expressed an interest. The mayor of Thionville has expressed an interest in coming to Urbana very soon, and we sort of start just suggesting that next summer when the weather's good, or in the fall. And quite a few of the counselors, and there are 44, I believe, counselors under the mayor, for a same-sized town as ours, 40,000 people. They're pretty excited to come, and we're going to have to do a real good job to engage them here in town, and there's lots to see, and I think they'd be very excited to come and visit us.
That's it.
So that's it. We had a really good time, and I'm sure that there'll be opportunities to return and visit Tealanville in the future.
Thank you. Any questions for Charlie or Dennis?
Or the mayor, for that matter.
Or the mayor? Okay.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So first on our agenda, we have 3 items to deal with. the new proposed enterprise zone. We have an ordinance and 2 resolutions. Brandon Boyes.
Good evening. As I will be addressing all 3 agenda items at once, I'm going to give a brief presentation, but I'm not going to go into a lot of detail as we've already had a study session on this, and but I can answer any questions you might have. This has been a long process. Staff has been researching and working on this enterprise zone proposal for about 2 years now. I want to give a shout out to Kate Ferrer, our economic development specialist, who's done a lot of work on this. In the last several months, we've been before a lot of public bodies. We've been at a lot of public meetings, and I'm pleased to report that every entity on that list with a check mark next to it is now participating or has voted to participate in property tax abatements in our enterprise zone. Parkland College, the Mass Transit District, the Urbana Park District, the Urbana School District, and Champaign County, which would also be the co-applicant for the enterprise zone and co-administrator of the enterprise zone. And the City Council would consider this final vote, as well as at the Cunningham Township meeting, preceding that meeting on December 1st. So this really is the culmination of a long process, and we still have to apply by the end of the year. And I think at this point, staff is eager to be able to just focus on a written proposal at this point, now that we've had the opportunity to get before so many bodies. The map of the proposed enterprise zone, which was included in a large detailed map in your packet, is proposed for a total of 9.2 square miles. It's quite a bit larger than our previous zone. One reason it's larger is because we're going to partner with the county, so we'll be able to include properties in the currently unincorporated areas that are likely to be developed. As you can see, a large portion, 3.7 square miles of the total 9.2, is zoned for or in the land use plan for residential specifically. And then, of course, a large chunk is for commercial and industrial. We're below the statutory limit, but the reason the zone is as large as it is because we've really sought to be as broadly inclusive as possible of all commercial industrial sites, as well as new single-family residential sites that are potentially developable, to ensure that that incentive opportunity is available equally amongst all the properties in the city that are appropriately zoned. Again, this is just the snapshot of the abatement schedule. We would use a declining abatement schedule so that the most abatement is realized in the first year, and then the new value starts adding on to the tax rolls for all the participating tax partners over a period of 5 years, and then there are greater incentives for major job creators. And I kind of want to emphasize the importance of the single family aspect of this. It's unique. It will be the first time Urbana has utilized residential in our enterprise zone. And also, it's going to give us the opportunity to offer a alternative to the now discontinued Build Urbana incentive to encourage new residential development, especially in subdivisions that were slowed down in the process of new home construction by the recession. And one of the more specific outcomes we're looking for, and one of the reasons why we feel that incentivizing new residential is an important component in the overall enterprise zone, which is ultimately about job creation and commercial growth, is that Menard's project, which was put on hold, is a 300-acre project that was slated to construct 500 residential lots. It's a very large amount of property on the east side of Urbana. And as long as that project remains on hold, it's going to kind of stunt the growth of East Urbana, the High Cross Corridor, which we're investing infrastructure in. And it also has an impact in Southeast Urbana and Philo Corridor, because those are primarily neighborhood commercial districts, and they need residences to support those businesses and help them build vibrant business centers. And I'll take any questions you have.
Any questions for Brandon? Yep, Dennis?
So it's this is a very significant fact that we have so many partner bodies that are willing to sign off on our this. This makes it very strong. Will the governing body that's going to make the choices, I guess it's the state, have any comment about the how broad, as far as like land mass of the city, is included? I mean, is there a possibility of overreaching in some manner that might not be, in our favor? I think it will be in our favor to include all these properties in there, but I mean, I just was sort of wondering if there's a tipping point where they say, well, what are you trying to do here?
Yeah, I don't believe it would count against us. Now, the process is sort of two-step. There's a 10-part application that we'll be putting together where we have to make do a lot of analyses to show that our local area labor market has the proper characteristics to qualify for a zone. And we're confident that we'll qualify under, far more than the minimum of those criteria, and we'll make a strong case. There's actually no criteria that are really specific to the boundary of the zone, other than you need to make the case for why you've set the zone the way you have. And we feel we can make a strong case for that, and the fact that we've been able to join with so many taxing partners to make this a robust proposal. We think it's going to be a very strong success. Frankly, we chose to go for a robust zone in size on the onset because there is a process that you have to go through to amend the boundary of the zone. And our most recent iteration, I think the full process took close to 6 months. It was longer than we would have liked. We did it specifically for Frasca, which is a well-established company that had a slow growth strategy. They're going to grow over a number of years. But for a project that's on the hinge of happening, we would prefer not to have to go through an amendment process because often that's too long to wait for a new project.
Diane?
Excuse me. I've gone to enough study sessions, so I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say I really appreciate the incorporation of the property tax abatements for the single-family duplex and zero lot line and townhome. So that covers a lot of different housing options for new construction, and it's the incentives offer basically make it equalize the property taxes between us and Champaign, and over a 10-year period, according to these calculations, you're actually paying lower property taxes in Urbana than you would on a home in Champaign. Which is going to help us a lot in terms of filling out some of the subdivisions like Stone Creek. So thank you very much for all the work you've done on this, and I know many people did. And I think this is a tremendous economic development tool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric?
The question I'm going to ask is really peripheral to the central point of this, which is economic development. But as you look at how we hope this plays out, what do you think will be the net effect on sprawl? Do you think it'll be neutral or may lead to some sprawl, or do you think it may actually lead to more, condensed city?
Well, I think our primary controls on sprawl are in the form of our zoning and other land use controls. An enterprise zone doesn't do anything to change those or allow subversions of those controls. And as I mentioned, we tried to equally apply this, the opportunity for this incentive both within the city proper and at the periphery. So I don't expect it to really have a impact on development at the fringe or versus infill for commercial or industrial outside. I mean, it's not going to add to anything to the situation in that regard. However, for new housing, when we looked specifically for new construction. So we targeted new construction opportunities, and most of those opportunities are on the edges of town. However, our main goal was to ensure primarily that we could fill in those lots that were already subdivided. I suppose it's possible that it would incentivize a developer now to go out and subdivide a larger tract of land, but I think it's unlikely. I think what we're going to do is we're going to be accelerating the progression of infill in existing subdivisions, and that may lead to additional subdivisions as well. If you step back, though, and look at all of Champaign-Urbana and its outward growth, I think that Urbana is at a natural disadvantage here because of the placement of Highway 57 and 74. That there's going to be, and Prospect Avenue as well, that those areas are proceeding in growth. They're proceeding in speculative buying of land and subdividing of land at a much higher rate. So if anything, Urbana could use a little more growth to keep some balance over on the east side of town.
Charlie?
Yeah, I think, like Diane, I think this is a very ambitious and well thought out plan. I really like the fact that we brought in all these partners, because I think that really strengthens the application. So kudos to staff for getting that done. I know that with many hours and many other meetings to go to do that. I think that the strength here is in extending what Eric's talking about here, is the opportunity to fill in sort of the growth boundary that we've got for our residential area, and to jumpstart some economic development in some natural industrial areas like North Lincoln Avenue. You know, we've seen growth there. It's been happening slowly and steadily, but if we can jumpstart some housing construction where we've identified that's where we want housing construction, maybe get Florida Avenue built to High Cross, take advantage of the new work that's been done on High Cross, we'll be much better off 10, 20, 30 years down the road here. So I'd actually like to get started on moving these to council. So there are 3 of them, and I'll move the first one, ordinance establishing a new enterprise zone in the city of Urbana, Champaign County. So I'll move to send that to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second. Or Kate.
Moved by Smythe, seconded by Dennis. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, so to continue that, the next one is resolution
motion
approving
carries.
an enterprise zone intergovernmental agreement between the city of Urbana, Illinois, and county of Champaign, Illinois. I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
Motion by Smythe, second by Carroll. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Charlie?
And the third one is a resolution to authorize property tax abatement for residential, commercial, and industrial property improvements in the Urbana Enterprise Zone. Move to send this to council with recommendation for approval.
Second.
Motion by Smythe, second by Marlin. All those in favor say, any
Aye.
other discussion?
Aye.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brandon. Next is resolution number 2014-11-65R, a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Housing Authority of Champaign County for the provision of environmental review services. That'll be Kelly Murkowski.
Good evening. Yes, before you is a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Housing Authority for the provision of environmental review studies. Any entity that receives federal funds from HUD, such as CDBG or home, supportive housing, public housing programs, Any entity, they are required to conduct environmental reviews on their activities and projects. Under 24 CFR Part 58, which is the regulations for the environmental reviews, the City of Urbana is deemed a responsible entity for such services on behalf of other entities, including the Housing Authority. Staff have received environmental review training, which included recent policy changes regarding the environmental review process, and we have an established relationship with HUD and the environmental field staff. So under the agreement, city staff would perform the necessary reviews for the Housing Authority for reimbursement on an hourly basis. This will assist the Housing Authority to provide affordable housing for residents in our county, and it's also a goal that's consistent with our consolidated plan and comprehensive plan. Approval of this intergovernmental agreement will result in revenue for staff time, which will assist with because of revenues that have been lost due to our declining HUD funds. So if you have any questions.
Any questions for Kelly? Charlie?
Yeah, Kelly, to one's peripheral. In terms of the funding, you know, about how much time and money do you expect per year on this?
I don't know if we come up with an exact hours. I'm thinking it was about 80 hours that we were looking at.
Okay.
For because a lot of their
Page 2.
page 2.
Yeah, the proposed agreement.
I know there was language about how much, okay, but you expect it to be about 80 hours,
I
okay.
think that comes,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
to figure about 80 hours,
Okay.
because a lot of theirs is new construction. So with that, there is more.
Yeah, so the peripheral question is does this sort of come out of the changes that they made, you know, that sort of messed us up with the planning for the tear downs on Lehrman?
Yeah, the training that staff attended, yes, that's when the policy changes came out. And us as a responsible entity are required to do environmental reviews for housing authorities. And the county is not a CDBG recipient, and that's what makes a responsible entity. It's because of the CDBG fund. So, and because of our good relationship with the Housing Authority, they asked if we would assist them. It's about 5, probably over the next like 2 or 3 years. So it won't be a lot of extra time, but it will help us and them.
Thank you.
Carol?
I was just going to ask, these sites are for all of Champaign County.
Yes, outside of Champaign County.
So we would do Champaign, outside of Champaign.
It'd be outside of city limits.
Outside of city limits.
Yes, outside of city limits. Example might be, say, Rantoul or Gifford or someplace like that, yeah, if they're looking.
And they don't receive CBD?
They don't. They don't.
But we wouldn't have to hire, I'm sorry, I apologize. I was trying to get to the 80 hours. We wouldn't be hiring a new person for that, correct?
No. I think the attachment shows Libby has worked on environmental reviews years ago. I've had training, our home coordinator, and plus there are some interns. So between all of us, we would be working on the reviews.
Okay.
Diane?
I guess that's the silver lining of Urbana townhomes, right? But,
Future.
yeah, Libby, I had asked the same question of Libby about the number of reviews, and she also mentioned that it's possible that you'd be doing some for the city of Champaign as well, so it could be more, so.
It's possible. It depends on how many that they need, because they probably would have a lot more than what the Housing Authority would. So staff may not be able to do that. So.
Okay, I know I'm sorry.
I had a question.
But you're the chair.
Can I just ask a question?
You can,
I'm not discussing. Okay. Are there any opportunities for interdepartmental cooperation and collaboration with Public Works, since they also do similar reviews for road projects? They have people in environmental sustainability and in environmental enforcement that might also be trained in that? Have you talked about that at all?
I have not. This is specifically in regards to those that receive HUD money, and I don't know if, I think when there's an entity receives federal funds, there are certain environmental, but this is specifically in regards to like the HUD funds, so that's why. We can certainly check with Public Works if they would be interested.
Okay. Any other questions? Carol?
I was just going to ask, I know we talked about before about housing inspections. That's what I was going to ask. Is this different from our regular housing inspections?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
Diane?
Well, I'm going to move resolution number 2014-11-65R to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Marlin, seconded by Smythe. Is there any more discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next is resolution number 2014-11-63R, a resolution to adopt the Urbana Climate Action Plan Phase 2. Scott Tess.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Scott Tess, Environmental Sustainability Manager for the city, and with me tonight is Maria Ryan. She's the chair of the Sustainability Advisory Commission. We're before you today to share Urbana's draft Climate Action Plan Phase 2. We want to discuss kind of the context that's set up for us tonight from Phase 1 of the Climate Action Plan, some background information that informs the Phase 2 document, including our new greenhouse gas inventory, and then touch on a quick review of the actions contained in this new draft. First, a couple of acronyms that you may see in here. GHG refers to greenhouse gases. MT, or MTCO2E, refers to metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So quick background here. Phase 1 of our Climate Action Plan was completed and approved in 2012. That plan listed our 2007 baseline greenhouse gas inventory, set greenhouse gas reduction targets, established some actions for some low-hanging fruit in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, set up some actions for staff to do some surveying and focus groups, and also directed staff to create a Phase 2 document. I've got 2 slides here. I'm not going to read them all. This is also in the plan. But in the Phase 2 document, there is a listing of accomplishments that we achieved in the 2 years of Phase 1. So a couple of highlights is the 84,252 renewable energy credits purchased through municipal electric aggregation. Almost 12 miles of bicycle infrastructure installed in that 2-year period, and some surveying and focus groups that we conducted to learn a little bit more about the context that we're dealing with. The Phase 2 document includes the Phase 1 accomplishments I just mentioned, a review of renewable energy credits, which we've discussed at Council before. We have an excerpt from a US EPA document, as well as an annotated bibliography regarding renewable energy credits, which is in the appendices. We also show the 2007 baseline greenhouse gas inventory, as well as a newly established 2013 greenhouse gas inventory. And then we have 2 types of strategies or actions in the plan. Some of them are bigger impact or nearer term strategies, and some of them are smaller impact or longer term, or you could say the impact is spread out over a longer timeline. These are our goals that were established in the first phase of the Climate Action Plan: a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 and an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. The graphic on the bottom of this page is similar to a graphic that was also included in the first phase, but it looked different. And so the red bar represents our 2007 greenhouse gas inventory. The dark blue and the light blue bar together is our projected 2020 inventory, and that 404,891 represents a 25% reduction from our 2007 inventory. Now in phase one, that blue bar, if you add the two, dark blue and light blue together, would have been a lot higher, a lot longer. And so we were predicting that our greenhouse gases were going to increase by a lot more. The reason that this 2020 projection is just slightly more than our 2007 baseline is because the new software, modeling software we use, is able to take into account the effect of the state's renewable portfolio standard. And so what we found when we modeled our 2020 projection again with the new software is that the effect of increasing emissions from population growth was more or less offset by the effect of the state's renewable portfolio standard, which requires that energy producers increase their renewable production in their portfolio by typically about 1% every year. So this is where we're at from 2007 baseline up to 2013. We've achieved a 10% reduction from that 2007 baseline, and that's in large part due to the impact of the renewable portfolio standard and our purchase of renewable energy credits. This is a graphic generated from our modeling software that shows that 10% reduction. You can see at the bottom, each one of those colored bars represents a particular sector, and the blue line at the very top is kind of the business as usual with the impact of the renewable portfolio standard. So it's a little hard to tell, but it increases very slightly. That blue bar that sort of has a bite taken out of it, so it goes down by half, that's the residential sector. The half taken out is the renewable energy credits. What's really important for me with this graphic is some of the categories such as solid waste, which are quite small in terms of the larger greenhouse gas emissions picture. And the reason that's important is because if we were to set really ambitious goals for waste reduction in terms of reducing the greenhouse gases that comes from waste, even if we reduce the waste sector by 50%, it would be a very small amount for our total greenhouse gas inventory. So I haven't told you, I told you that we've had a 10% reduction, but I haven't put it in context yet. This graphic continues a graphic that was in our first phase, but we've updated where all these other cities stand. So we had originally compared our greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals with other cities' goals. And so with assistance from Kate Brickman in my office, we went through all of these cities' websites and found all of their status updates and progress updates and found where they were at. And if you look by comparison, we're doing pretty well. Now, this is not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison. Different cities have different baseline years. They have different goals that, for percent reductions. But you do get a sense of the context where people are. Some cities are having substantial reductions, while others aren't even able to do a follow-up inventory and see where they stand. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, I wondered if, you're talking about percentage reductions, but do you have any measurement of what the actual levels are for these cities?
It's in their plans.
Per capita? And would the ranking change?
Yeah, it very well could. We didn't look at the data that way, but probably could.
Okay, thanks.
This graphic kind of shows where we're going. So this is 2007, that was our baseline year, up to 2050, which was our final milestone year. And the bite taken out of that blue section, again, the residential section, is the impact of renewable energy credits. In this particular rendering, I've included renewable energy credits from when we started using them up into 2020, which is our other milestone year. And then I cut off, in the model, I cut off the use of renewable energy credits just to show what it would look like if we stopped purchasing renewable energy credits in 2020. They're a year-by-year reduction. They're not a permanent reduction. You can see the dark blue dotted line just above 400,000. That's our 2020 goal. And you can see the green line, that's our 2050 goal. You also notice that the business as usual line, the light blue line at the top, it sort of flattens out. That's the effect of the renewable portfolio standard. But then in 2025, it starts to go up again. And that's because the state's renewable portfolio standard only goes through 2025. So we lose that benefit then. And the effect of expected population growth starts raising our emissions again.
So you're looking at overall emissions as opposed to emissions per capita?
Correct. Our goal is not a per capita goal. It's an absolute goal, which is more stringent. This is a graph and a short listing of strategies of what it could look like for us to reach our 25% reduction by 2020. We identified 3 strategies or 3 actions that can add up to a 25% reduction or get the last 15%, you might say. I've put an updated page in front of all of your computers. There was 2 errors on the page that I wanted to correct in preparing. Just notice a couple errors. One of them was a transcription error, simply moving data from a more recent rendering of our model into the actual plan document. The other error was actually a modeling error. I had undercounted the impact of the a home energy performance program because I had not made the modeling cumulative, so the impact wasn't being added additionally every single year. So that's an update that's in front of you. But the 3 strategies that can add up to 25% that we've identified, staff and SAC, are the continual purchase of renewable energy credits with the Municipal Electric Aggregation Program, a restart of the Home Energy Performance Program. Urbana did this for 1 year a number of years ago with ARA funds, with Reinvestment Act funds. And finally, some savings in the commercial energy sector, which we have a couple of different strategies for. So I want to run through real quickly the 6 goal areas and the actions along with them. I'm not going to read all of them, but I'm just going to try and summarize them and then have time for questions and discussion. First section is reducing energy use in the built environment. We have a number of goals here that propose some changes that would set us on a long-term course for energy reduction in things like building standards. And so the wording here is very open and broad to give us the biggest range of policies to consider. So we're using wording like incentivizing or requiring. We also have some goals to improve data acquisition for the commercial sector, engaging with Ameren to work with Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is a US EPA program. And then again, the funding for the Urbana Home Energy Performance Program. Second goal area is to reduce transportation emissions from fossil fuels. We want to take a look at the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design standard for neighborhood developments and see if there's some particular items that we could bring into our existing zoning and development codes. And then another goal to work with a lot of the other existing plans and plans that are being updated, such as the Bicycle Master Plan and the forthcoming pedestrian survey, and reduce vehicle mode share. Second or third goal area is to increase renewable energy purchasing and installation. These are a number of goals to enhance our local renewable energy market in terms of buying RECs, in terms of buying bundled power and RECs, and in terms of on-site installations. Fourth goal area moves away from mitigation and towards adaptation. We have a number of goals to take a look at how we can be better prepared for eventual climate impacts, including stormwater standards. There's the design storm standard is how we decide how developments need to address stormwater removal, and that standard, the design storm standard, is set by the state. We also want to take a look at ways to maintain and improve our urban tree canopy. It does a couple of things for us in terms of adaptation. It helps cool our houses without AC, and cools us when we're on the sidewalk, and also stores carbon dioxide. And then finally, utilize our city-owned properties to incorporate pollinator supportive species. Fifth goal area is to leverage existing programs and organizations in the community to enhance their impact and to extend our own impact in terms of energy efficiency. And then the final goal area is to continue to re-inventory our greenhouse gases on a 2-year time frame, and also work with the Sustainability Advisory Commission in 2020 to produce a third long-term plan. And take any questions you may have.
Questions for Scott? Diane?
Well, first of all, you got to update that bronze bicycle level on the front
Yeah.
page to gold. And but my question centers on the projected CO2 values, and everything seems to focus on the residential sector as making the biggest improvement. But I'm not seeing things like, 29 or 30% of the land area in Urbana is tax exempt, meaning it's government or church or school or park or university buildings. And where are those reflected in this graph here? I mean, I know university buildings are exempt completely, even though we have a lot of them in Urbana, which makes no sense at all. But that's the reality of things. But what about all the other government buildings, public buildings in this city?
When the first 2007 inventory was created here at the city, there was a decision to split the energy consumption and the greenhouse gas emissions from university buildings out of the Urbana inventory, because the university has their own climate action plan. So we're sort of they're excluded anyway. They're not in our mix.
Right.
In terms of commercial, well, you mentioned public sector. Just taking a look at Urbana's public facilities, city-owned buildings, and their percentage of the total is quite small. So again, if the city of Urbana facilities were carbon neutral, it would have 1 or 2%.
But as an
impact.
aggregate, it has to be. I mean, with all the public sector buildings aggregated together, it has to be significant, isn't it?
When you
Or
add,
is it?
it's more when you add them up. One of the differences in terms of energy efficiency in a house versus a larger commercial building is that the reductions per dollar are better for a house. And the reason is the house has more exterior surface area per square foot, so it loses more heat per square foot than, say, a large box, a commercial building. So that's one reason that you can make a dollar go farther in the residential sector. That's probably my best explanation.
Well, that makes sense. We're one of those families that had the energy audit and never followed through, and I'm anxiously awaiting for the program to start up again. So, thanks.
Other questions? Charlie?
Yeah, to keep going on Diane's question a bit, the commercial energy section that you show here, 8%, and you need to tackle it to get to 25%, so there's no way around it. I mean, we have to go after that. It's a big chunk here. 8% seems like a pretty low goal. Let's try, given that we've done so much with residential, is there no potential to do the same with commercial?
There is. One of the reasons we've made such huge gains in the residential sector of greenhouse gases is because of the purchase of renewable energy credits through municipal electric aggregation. those renewable energy credits are paid for per kilowatt hour by the user, by the account holder. We don't have the ability to do that in the commercial sector, which means that if we're going to incentivize some energy efficiency in the commercial sector, we're going to have to, we would be left using our own cash. So that's one of the challenges. Now we have a program going right now working with commercial buildings, and we're partnering with other agencies in the region. It's called the Urbana Champaign Energy Star Challenge. And what we're doing is engaging building owners and managers to benchmark, track, and reduce their energy use on the free EPA program, Energy Star Portfolio Manager. That program and the power of that program is based on the idea that you can't manage what you don't measure. So we're asking people to take that first step and measure what they should be managing and treat their energy bills as just another business practice.
Mayor Preston?
So,
sorry.
if I could follow up on that. So is there a, we have a residential program. Can we get to a commercial program, a similar commercial program via, say, legislative help in Springfield or something like that? And so,
In terms of aggregation or in terms of?
in terms of aggregation, yeah, so that we can go after renewable energy credits.
Yeah, I don't think it's in state law presently. Commercial businesses can, a lot of them buy through collective arrangements in terms of buying their electricity and try and drive down the price that way. But I haven't seen any of those arrangements incorporate renewable energy credits. And that's something we can certainly engage business groups and individual businesses in. But either they're paying it or we're paying it.
Mayor Preston?
Yeah, on the reducing the automobile use, there's a real trend that younger people don't get their driver's licenses right away, and they're not driving as much. And so, and also we have this huge increase in the MTD passengers. So have you built those two things into your model? I mean, there's a trend that's going on anyway without us even doing anything.
Right. So we get our transportation data from the Regional Planning Council, and they have their own transportation model. They don't necessarily measure vehicle miles traveled directly because it's not really possible. So in that sense, we have a model inside of another model. The projections are kind of flat for our transportation emissions. We haven't attempted to model a reduction, say, in this cultural change that you're mentioning, but we haven't modeled much of an increase in transportation emissions either. Certainly, the city and Public Works is doing a lot to facilitate those different mode shares. We have an enormous bicycle infrastructure that's already built out, and there's still some more to come. We're also supporting a pedestrian infrastructure survey, and there's a lot of interest in the community to follow that up with a pedestrian master plan that would be similar to our bicycle master plan, and that's also one of the bulleted items in the transportation section in our plan here.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
In your projections for how private energy use may, well, hopefully decline private emissions, do your projections deal with specific large ticket energy adaptations like rooftop solar collectors or geothermal energy? Do you foresee those making a substantial dent in our emissions in this time period?
So in order to kind of see what that would look like, we use the software to represent some reasonable uptake of rooftop solar, people putting it on their house or their business. And any reasonable expectation of uptake just had a small impact. If you imagine how many 5, 10, 20, 100 systems going up a year, it takes a lot to really have a big impact. The amazing thing about the renewable portfolio standard is that it's every single electricity user, commercial, residential, is enjoying the benefit of that slowly uptick of the percent that's renewable in our grid. And that's very, very powerful, as you can see on the graphic. But any conceivable uptick in rooftop solar has a small impact. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Right.
So there, one of the programs we, with RPC, applied for some grant funding for, we weren't successful, but we're going to continue to look at the program, is something a lot of cities are doing called Solarize. And it's essentially some entity in the community, city, a nonprofit, a business, takes the lead in a group solar purchase, and they essentially put out a request for quote to solar installers and promise them that they're going to round up a big group of solar purchasers. So they drive down the price with the promise of a big group of hot leads for one installer. So that program in cities that have done it has seen between a 10 and a 30% reduction in the cost of installed solar. So we're going to look at whether it's possible for us with staff time that we already have to move forward with a program like that. And that's a good thing to do. We can lower costs, get people engaged with rooftop solar, but it's going to have a small impact on our total emissions inventory.
Any projections on geothermal heating and cooling?
It's I haven't actually modeled that particular one, but it's more or less the same story. If you think about what the uptake could be, 0.5% of the population a year, 1% a year, and then you multiply that out times the impact per household, it just doesn't add up to a lot.
Carol?
I'll just make a comment and then I'll move. Yes. One is that I am interested in what Mr. Jacobson just talked about, and there is a fund that the energy companies pay into at the state level that is not being used. It would be lovely for us to pass state law to allocate those funds for homeowners to do exactly what we're talking about here. And two, I really appreciate the full plan, what we saw last year, my first year on council, to what I'm looking at now, which is great. And I'm like Diane, looking forward to be able to do some of these things in our own home. So I'd like to move resolution number 2014-11-63R, a resolution to adopt the Urbana Climate Action Plan Phase 2 to council with a recommendation for approval.
It's been moved by Carol and seconded by Charlie to move this to council with recommendation for approval. Is there more discussion? Dennis?
Yeah. I just had one question, and I think I can guess the answer, but when most people think about saving money and being efficient, and they talk about getting off the grid for electric power or gas, they resort, or their choice often is wood stoves. So I'm just wondering, do you want to put that in perspective? Are those choices, which seem to be preferable to a lot of homeowners for certain reasons, are they counterproductive to the goals of the city?
I would guess that wood stoves are going to have a higher greenhouse gas content than, say, wind turbines and solar panels. How they compare to our grid as it is now, I can't say. We have a lot of nuclear, and we have a lot of coal in our grid, and an increasing amount of natural gas. So it's hard to say. However, looking at the state estimates for different energy users, such as wood-fired stoves and so forth, the numbers are so small that it's not going to have an appreciable impact on our inventory. And if 10% of the population switches from a natural gas furnace to a wood stove, that would have an impact if we modeled it. But I wouldn't expect to have that much.
Dennis, would you take the chair for a minute? I just have a comment or question.
Yeah. Bill, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, please. I appreciate the annotated bibliography you guys did for the recs, and I recognize a lot of the sources, and I know that in the past I was really critical of the renewable energy credits, and I still am. I really don't believe that they make a significant difference in the emissions. And I think anybody that reads the sources in the annotated bibliography would come to the same conclusion. So for that reason, I'm a little disappointed that there wasn't more besides RECs that you're depending on. But beyond that, I just wondered how this plan takes advantages of our local resources and our local strengths. I know we have a lot of people that know a lot about renewable energy and greenhouse gases and have studied it at the U of I. We have somebody that was on the panel that shared the Nobel Prize with Al Gore in 2007. I don't think he was from Urbana, I don't know, but he was from our area. And we have all this expertise in crops, and the idea that you could improve bush yields per acre by 1 bushel and probably remove more carbon dioxide than anything we could do locally. So how are we leveraging our local assets at the university? How are we leveraging our creativity that we have downtown and in other places to come up with kind of homegrown solutions other than this kind of boilerplate stuff that you might see from any community? I mean, it's not. I'm not being too critical. I'm being a little critical, but I think you've done a great job with what you've done, and I think not many communities are going to be that accurate with their calculations. But frankly, you could go to Atlanta or some other city and take this and do about the same plan, and it wouldn't look a whole lot different. So I guess I'm encouraging you, it doesn't sound like it, encouraging you between this action plan and between phase 2 and phase 3 to keep meeting and to actually try to think outside the box and come up with some of these creative solutions if you haven't already.
I just wanted to comment a little bit because I think a lot of this activity happened before Scott had joined the staff here. But some years back, there was a great deal of interest in maybe doing something like a mini grid in downtown Champaign, and some talk of maybe doing something kind of large-scale solar in Urbana, exploring some of those possibilities. And there was a lot of certainly a lot of creative thinking that went on around it, and kind of where things started to where the obstacles came in had partly to do with the way that utilities are regulated, partly to do with those markets, and a lot to do with and I don't have technical expertise with that dimension of things, but certainly some issues with how do you fit a mini grid into the existing, both the legal structures, regulatory structures, as well as the technical structures. And so there were just a number of obstacles that kind of, I guess those ideas are sort of on hold. I think some of the people who were interested in pursuing those ideas are still around, but the obstacles haven't really been surmounted at this point. But I think we do see those waves of creativity that come, and I think that those will continue.
Okay, I hope it would. And just to throw a couple of examples out there, I know that like EDC does Innovation Celebration, where they celebrate innovations from the local community. If you maybe sponsored some kind of energy celebration, a similar sort of thing where you'd maybe encourage students or groups to try to solve particular problems, whether it's storage of wind energy or harvesting of methane gas so they don't have to flare it off in our shale fields and oil fields. There may be engineering solutions and other kinds of things we could do locally that would have a greater impact than just a 5% reduction by buying renewable energy credits. And one other thought, I submitted it actually as a comment, but I didn't see it, so I don't know if maybe I forgot to hit submit. One of them, one idea might be just to have like a Energy Expo scheduled every year where you'd have people at Lincoln Square in the Middle Market or something to show kind of what you can do at home, because I think one of the reasons people don't act is they don't have the kind of opportunity and the education or encouragement, and by seeing all the different things you can do in your house to save energy, I think something like that would be useful too.
Yeah, we're actually doing a pilot program right now somewhat similar to what you're describing. We're utilizing an existing model that was created that leverages neighborhood or block groups to get together 5 to 8 households get together and go through a process to set their own goals for being more energy efficient in not just their household, but other parts of their lives, like transportation. And going through that process, well, we're going to do a couple pilot tests and kind of see what the results are. But from some of the other communities that have done this, it's only been done in a couple, the results seem to be pretty impactful, per dollar. And that's one of the things that we spent a lot of time on in this plan, was not just looking at what reduces greenhouse gases, but what reduces greenhouse gases per dollar spent. And setting aside RECs, which are the cheapest thing we can do, the next best thing that we found compared to all the technical data that CDAC, Smart Energy Design Assistance Center, has been able to share with us, was our home energy performance program. And it's air sealing and insulation. And it's boring, but it's the cheapest per dollar. And so that's kind of why some of these strategies are kind of boilerplate. They're what works.
I would support that rather than RECs. And I'll take the chair back.
Yeah, if that's good commentary, and I give the chair back to you.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion on this item? If not, there's been a motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have resolution number 2014-11-64R, resolution to authorize execution of intergovernmental agreement between City of Urbana, City of Champaign, Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District, Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois for application and receipt of transportation investing generating economic recovery discretionary grant, TIGER grant, Champaign-Urbana Multimodal Corridor Enhancement, Public Works. Bill Gray.
Thank you. We have good news. We received this TIGER grant, $15.7 million. We matched the project with $19 million local dollars. The 4 agencies that you just read off are contributing various amounts. The Urbana commitment to help with this endeavor is about $2.1 million. The 2 projects, there's 5 projects total that make up this MCOR project, and again, that's the Champaign-Urbana Multimodal Corridor Enhancement, or the acronym we call is MCOR. And the 2 Urbana projects are basically Green Street between Race and Wright split in half. The latest termini, if you will, or limits of the projects for Project 1 is now east of Lincoln Avenue or Busey Avenue to Wright Street. The second phase or later project would be then from Busey to Race Street. Those 2 projects, when you add them together, are around $9 million in estimated, very preliminary, but estimated cost. The Urbana contribution is $2.1 million, so we're looking at over 60% funding of federal dollars for this project, which is fantastic for the city of Urbana. In the packets, and what we're here tonight to discuss is the Urbana obligations and the other agency obligations via an intergovernmental agreement. And more good news is that the city of Urbana is not the lead agency here. Thank you very much. But the city of Champaign is, and that's fine. So they're taking the lead. They will be the grantee, if you will, with the Federal Highway Administration grant. And the packet is a little bit confusing with the various exhibits, and let me just go through that first. In the intergovernmental agreement, the draft that you have, there's an Exhibit A, and the Exhibit A is really the MCOR application. And mind you, we tried this 3 times, and the 3rd time we didn't strike out but hit a home run. But this is our application, and part of it was, we talk about not only multimodal enhancements, complete street enhancements, lighting enhancements, signal enhancements, but also economic development enhancements in the community. So it's a very thorough application. It took a lot of effort and work to put this together. And the other key component, again, was the local match, which really helped us in getting this grant. So that's Exhibit A. Exhibit B is merely our notification, if you will, that we received the grant. Okay, so that's what all this says. There wasn't actually a letter. It was just on the website this is the acknowledgement, if you will, that we received a grant. Exhibit C now really hasn't begun. In fact, we had every Monday afternoon we have a conference call with Federal Highway and the 4 agencies, and we're now in a position to start putting, kind of fill in the blanks, if you will, on Exhibit C. Exhibit C is the agreement then that will be with the City of Champaign. This will become more formalized, and just to give you an example, Council, you're familiar with city IDOT agreements we've had in the past where we received IJN money, Only Jobs Now money, or Surface Transportation Program money. And it could be a 5 or 10 page agreement between us and IDOT. We've seen those in the past for some of our road projects. Well, in a way, that's what this Exhibit C is. It's that rather than an agreement with IDOT, it's with the Federal Highway Administration. So that's what the City of Champaign role will be, is since they are a highway authority, as we are a highway authority, the Federal Highway has to have an agreement with a highway authority. For your information, MTD is not a highway authority. The University of Illinois is not a highway authority. So those two couldn't become party of this agreement to begin with. So Exhibit C will mature in the weeks ahead. We think come January or so, maybe February, it'll be finalized with all the details in it. But I want you to understand that in the intergovernmental agreement, although it plays a role to some degree, really this is something that, well, let me back up a second. I think what's important about the intergovernmental agreement is who's the lead agency, what is our share of funds, which is $2.1 million, and then what will be the time frame that will be paying those dollars out, and that's to be determined, okay? But in the memo, I identified 4 funding sources that will be our share of the $2.1 million. It's local motor fuel tax, state motor fuel tax, some stormwater utility fee because there's stormwater-related improvements, and if there is a new downtown tax increment financing district, there is eligible between Birch and Ray Street, essentially Green Street by the library. That stretch there could help fund the project. So those are our 4 sources of funding for the $2.1 million. Back to the agreement, though, is that Exhibit D, probably the most important exhibit to be aware of, and that is the 5 projects listed. Again, Project 1 and 5 are Urbana's projects. Project 2, 3, and 4 are essentially Champaign projects. MTD has a little bit of participation in each project, primarily upgrading bus shelters to make them kind of state-of-the-art shelters with the real-time kiosks, et cetera. There will also be enhancements at the traffic signals along this route where there will be preemption equipment installed for buses to help them stay on time, not get delayed due to traffic signal delays. The University of Illinois is contributing also. Their main contributions are going toward Wright Street and Armory Street. And then, of course, the City of Champaign with White Street between 2nd and Wright Street from White down to Armory, and then Armory, portions of Armory from Wright Street to 4th Street. But really, I'm very pleased that our projects are being funded about over 60%. If you do the math, some of the other projects are funded only at 14 or 17%, and that's just because the Tiger Grant isn't contributing as large of funding because of the criteria that they use. So one thing that we had to satisfy with Federal Highway, and this was a real sticking point initially, was they wanted us to commit, or the term they use is obligate, the $15.7 million by June of 2016. Well, that's a tall order, particularly to try to get 5 projects ready, $35 million worth of work ready by a little over a year from now. What we were able to discuss, maybe a better word is negotiate, is they are willing to fund 100% of the construction costs to spend that $15.7 million toward construction expenses only for projects 1, 2, and 3. And we had to have those project construction costs add up to the $15.7 million. So again, on Exhibit D, you'll see projects P1, 2, and 3. You'll see the green box, which is Tiger Grant construction, $15.7 million. So to make the construction dollars at 100% funding federal dollars match correctly, we had to change the limits of the projects a little bit to use that $15.7 million. So what I mean by that is the Urbana project, as we originally intended, was to be between Lincoln and Wright. What we did is we extended it to Busey Avenue. And similarly, Champaign had a White Street project between 2nd and Wright. Well, now it also includes a piece on Wright Street between Springfield and White. So those were some of the things that we did to try to spend more construction dollars earlier on to use the $15.7 million. The cash flow is complicated. We still don't know exactly how that all is going to play out, but just so you know, the Urbana Project 1, again, between Busey and Wright, the engineering fees, total engineering fees, the preliminary engineer, the design, and then the construction engineering is estimated to be a little over $700,000. You know, that's our responsibility. So between now and come June or so 2016, we'll actually, between now and June 2016, we'll be spending PE1 and PE2 money. When construction starts, which would be probably summer 2016, then we'd be spending the PE3 or construction engineering dollars. So that would be our cash flow, if you will, over the next 18 to 24 months, is at $708,000. But over the 5-year period total, we're going to be, like I said, spending about $2.1 million. There's also going to be some MTD matching to help us with our share, with the local share of those two projects. Back to the intergovernmental agreement, there's quite a bit of language in there about reporting. Federal Highway has made a big emphasis about the importance of how we have to document along the way our progress during the design and construction. Once the project's completed, we have to do more documentation, such as bus trips and a host of things that each agency will have to report on a quarterly basis. So there's a fair amount of staff time to do the reporting, which we will do, but that was one of the conditions of this grant. I think the other key point I want to bring to your attention is that if we determine that there's some additional important expenditures along Green Street that we would like to do, those expenses will be at 100% our cost. So if we want to, whatever, do something other than, I'm sorry? If there's, well, we're going to be doing all the sidewalk intersection ramps, and there's a lot of ramp work, particularly on the East Green Street project. But if there's just some component that becomes more costly than we originally put in the application, and again, I go back to the Exhibit A, which is the application now. So if there's something different than what's in here, that's more money, we're going to have to pay for it. And we may decide as a council to do that. One thing that is in here is wayfinding signage. Okay, so that is included, so that we will be trying to incorporate that aspect of the Green Street project for wayfinding and signage. But at this point, it's hard to say. Sometimes there's unusual utility surprises that may come about. There may be some extension of a road work we may want to do. I don't know, pave all the way to the front door of Lincoln Square Village and Green Street, which wasn't the original limits, but we decided that's what we wanted to do. Who knows what? So I just wanted to give you that heads up. But I'll stop and ask any questions. But this is really an outstanding opportunity for us to use federal dollars to help us rebuild a stretch of green from really the Wright Street stretch all the way to downtown.
Thank you. Carol, did you have a question?
This is obviously a big grant. I think you mentioned this to us, that this was going to be coming, that you all were working on, but it seems to me that our funding sources are seemingly unlimited because the motor fuel tax seems to pay for more projects than my mind can handle, whether we actually have the money for. And we're having a conversation about not having money, but we have some money somewhere. Please explain how we pay for this and not pay for.
Right. Well, unfortunately, the money is very limited, very finite. And what this will do, and it's part of, be careful what you ask for, is that we need to fix Green Street anyway. We had Green Street in our capital improvement plan, but on a much more reduced scale. I mean, milling and resurfacing a couple inches and kind of a lick, if you will, to push it down the road 10 more years. This will fix the road in a more substantial way, so we won't have to look at it 10 years down the road. It'll be much longer. So that's one of the differences. But there will be some project delays. I won't kid you. We're going to have to defer some work in some other areas. What Craig Schonkweiler and I are working on, and that gets into the budget amendment ordinances that you'll see in the months ahead, is we have to figure out how are we going to fit the cash flow of these funding sources and projects. And we're kind of coming to that time of the year when we have to look at the capital improvement plan update. We're not too far away from that exercise anyway. But the biggest concern I have is a big project we have for 2015 is milling and resurfacing Lincoln Avenue from like Killarney, south of Interstate 74, up to Wilbur Road, which is right by the Saline Bridge up there by Super Value. That's about a $1.4 million project. That road is really, well, we have a lot of roads that are pretty worn, but heavy truck traffic, and we kind of wanted to synchronize that Lincoln Avenue work with the other Lincoln Avenue work associated with Olympian Drive and try to get that all fixed up nicely. So I don't have answers tonight specifically to your question, but when we come back with budget amendment ordinance as to how we're going to pay the cash flow, we're going to discuss those impacts. But we do, quite honestly, we do have money identified for Green Street on campus and east of Lincoln Avenue, but not to the total reconstruction aspect of it.
What's the difference between what you had already allocated for this smaller scale to what this is?
Well, a couple things. First of all, we have new street lighting on Green Street in this project. We have some upgraded traffic signals that we didn't have when we were talking about before. We are going to be doing some widening work to accommodate bike lanes on Green Street. We're going to have a bus-only lane on Green Street on campus, and then a driving lane. So some median work is going to be needed. Some curb and gutter work was going to be needed. What we were going to do before is basically not change the cross-section of the street. The curb and gutter stays right where it is. The center and median stays right where it is. The street lights are right where they are. And we're going to just mill a couple 3 inches and overlay it, and that was the end of it. Okay, this is a much more of a rebuild type of a project, much more expensive. And then Green Street east of Lincoln is going to be essentially a reconstruction. So all those driveways that are banged up, all the sidewalks that are kind of in disrepair. Now the street lighting's in good shape. That's fairly new. But the road work will be redone. I have to tell you there's going to be a fair amount of public engagement for both these projects, and just to seed the thought is one key component in this application, and part of the complete street application that we made here was the parking matter on Green Street east of Lincoln. And right now in here we're showing bike lanes, and the two probably won't coexist. So that's a discussion we're going to have to undertake.
Dennis?
Yeah. Well, Bill, this is pretty exciting. A lot of work and hopefully a lot of public input. That's true. So my question originally was going to be about would this project include any of our wayfinding? And you're saying it will.
We will include it just obviously on the Green Street portion.
Yeah, but at least it would be maybe some of the first wayfinding that we'll actually fund.
Correct.
In that area. Using the style of design for wayfinding signage that we've approved in the past.
Oh, yes.
And Is there a reference specifically to that aspect of the project in Exhibit A, I guess you're calling it?
No, it just mentions the word wayfinding. Now, we have a plan, which we've done phase 1 already, which is the downtown parking, signage, that sort of thing. But no, the plan is a good plan, so we're going to use, that will be the plan we give to our consultant.
Okay, so that's how it's going to be initiated and included into the designing work.
Right. And just for your information, we sent letters of interest out to the world of consulting engineers, and we've received responses, and Wednesday we're going to talk about those letters of interest we've received and shortlist, if you will, and then interview consultants the second week of December, and then hopefully select one consultant or consultant team, if you will, and then a contract will be entered into with the City of Champaign. But again, that consultant will work with each agency on their specific project. So for our project, the consultant will be working with us to do the study, preliminary design, and moving forward. So,
okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Diane.
Just so I understand, what we're voting on tonight is just to authorize the mayor to enter into the agreement, and then this draft will come back to us at some point for us to approve?
Correct. I think after our meeting today and our meeting last week that I'm going to provide the very latest in the packet for this coming Monday night on the intergovernmental agreement. If there's any changes between now and Monday night, December 1st, I will verbally tell you those, but otherwise what will be in the packet should be the very latest draft intergovernmental agreement. Now, the federal highway grant is nowhere near done, but in a way, although I doubt there's going to be any aspect of that changes or impacts the IGA or impacts our cost participation, but I just want you to realize that the mayor will not be signatory to that. It will be the City of Champaign with the Federal Highway City of Champaign agreement.
Okay.
So I will note any significant changes. With right now, I don't expect any, but it will be in the packet, or I will make an announcement Monday night before, assuming this gets passed to forwarded to council for a recommendation for approval. Just to let you know, also, the City of Champaign tomorrow night is having a study session, and at their council meeting on December 2nd, they would be reviewing the same thing. Similar, the university and MTD are going through board approvals.
Okay. Well, with that, I'd move resolution number 2014-11-64R to council with a recommendation for approval.
It's been moved by Marlin, seconded by Amons. Charlie?
Yeah, two quick ones, Bill. Just to follow up. So when you put together the capital improvement plan for the coming year, basically we'll need about 5 years of cash flow, right? Because this goes through 2019.
You are correct. Yeah, it's 5 years, and correct. Basically, the construction won't start realistically till summer 2016. It'll probably be a year-long process. It's going to impact U of I school during school. We can't do this project during the summer months, but we can get through that. So then the next project would be not till 2018, 2019. So we may have a little bit in the middle of a lull, if you will.
Right.
Yes.
We catch our breath and save our pennies.
Save our pennies.
Right. And then the second question is, when do we see the actual designs for the two pieces that Urbana's got going?
Well, this is the hard part, is that we're going to be, the consultant will almost be doing concurrent study, preliminary design, and final design at the same time, and there is some risk in doing that. But the project schedule doesn't allow us to do either one. But to answer your question, I would say a year from now we'll be getting into the design and final design. Maybe summer will be to that point. But prior to design, we do want to have, and we will have, some meetings, public meetings, to talk about the projects. Since the Lincoln, or I should say Busey to Wright, is the first project, that's the one we're going to focus on first. But then, again, with the same consultant, we'll be talking about the second component perhaps a year later, more into the 2016 timeframe for Busey to race.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I guess we have some conceptual plans here to flesh out. I know there's debate about whether you do the bike lane with the buses or separate from the buses, and the whole issue of how to do the eastern leg of Green Street to Lincoln Square. But for connectivity purposes, I mean, the whole idea is complete streets here, so it's a chance to make a real impact on our bike master plan.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But so I think that public discussion up front is going to be really important.
Mm-hmm.
Eric.
So Naomi just sent me a text reminding me that she wrote a letter on behalf of this. And so, Carol, although we'll be losing you on the council, we'll be counting on you to keep bringing home the bacon. or bring home the broccoli, bring home the tofu, yeah.
On that note, if there's no more discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Next we have ordinance number 2014-11-108, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for FY 2014-2015. Oh, I have 8. Okay, maybe it's 109.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to actually move extension of this meeting for till 10:15. Our end time is supposed to be 10 o'clock. Oh, is it 11?
Yeah.
It should be 10.
Wait till you get to Springfield.
Okay, and that's Elizabeth.
What you have before you is a budget amendment that covers a variety of items. There were some things that weren't addressed during the period when there was a vacancy in this position. The big item here is wage increases for AFSCME and non-bargaining employees. So this would include all of the retro pay for last fiscal year before the AFSCME contract was settled, and then all the additional pay for the current fiscal year, and NBU employees at the same rate as AFSCME employees. Other items included in this budget amendment are a recommendation for a new financial analyst position in the finance department. I think after, well, having only been here 4 weeks, but after engaging in a lot of discussion, there's definitely a need for some more capacity to really do some long-term financial planning and evaluate our situation so that we can make good long-term decisions about the budget. There are some what I'll call fixes on the budget for UC2B. The budget was simply insufficient to meet our obligations, and so we would increase the budget in the big broadband fund. There's some adjustments in the retained risk fund and the workers' comp insurance reserve, and that relates to a few things. One is we paid a very large workers' compensation claim at the end of October. In addition, we've had increases in some insurance premiums. And finally, we are recommending adding $15,000 for an actuarial study so that we can really get a good handle on what our workers' comp reserve should be. Finally, we're recognizing revenue from an insurance reimbursement in the general fund, which was not budgeted. Bottom line here in the general fund is that we have a small increase in revenues, a much larger increase in expenditures, and we will decrease the ending fund balance by slightly more than $200,000. And there's impacts. We're amending a number of funds here, so there's impacts on a number of funds, and those are all detailed in the attachment.
So questions, Eric?
So I notice in the breakdown of the salary adjustments that are caused by the settlements, the AFSCME settlements, that the library is not included. And I believe in previous years there was a budget adjustment for that. So I wondered why the library is not there, and if the library were there, well, okay, maybe that's the first question. And then the second question is, if the library were there, what would be the impact?
Mayor Presson.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that, Eric. I'd like the library board to have a chance to look at their budget and figure out, they're, I guess, discussing what kind of raises they want to give. And so that's the reason they're not included here, because this was in the general fund that we were looking at. And the library fund is separate. They've got their own board. So I think that is a budget decision. And if they need some help on getting their raises, they can certainly, we can work that out in the budget. But I think it's, there's a question of bringing them up to the same level as the employees in the rest of the city. But as our new finance director has pointed out, before you do something like that, you really do have to have a study of the jobs to see what the proper salaries should be. So I think it's just premature to do that right now, but I'm not saying that we shouldn't help them if they need the help. But right now, we don't even really know what their fund balance is. That's what we're trying to figure out.
Carol.
I need to ask a parliamentarian question because I have a concern about voting for these all together. I wanted to, because the way that it's written, I would normally call for separation here, but I don't know how to do that because it's written in a narrative form with one resolution or one ordinance connected to it.
No, there's attachment.
No. Do you understand my question?
This is a single ordinance, and if you if you pass this ordinance, you're approving every single line item in this ordinance.
And I want to divide the question.
I second that.
I want to divide the question so that I can deal with the bargaining units separate from the other items, because those items need further discussion, and the bargaining units we've already agreed to that retroactive point in the contracts. So I'm calling for a separation of all of these items from the bargaining units. So that's my motion. I think the motion can actually go before the ordinance. That's why I was asking for Parliament.
You can make a motion to make changes to the ordinance, and the city council can vote on that motion before it gets to the main ordinance.
So my motion is to separate the budget amendment ordinance for the bargaining units from the other items in this memo. So that's my motion.
I'll second that.
So, okay. We have a motion and a second.
I need some
Charlie?
clarification.
Let me just
here.
clarify.
Okay.
All of this, the separation of the items would include, the items included in my separation would be wage increases for the ASME and non-bargaining unit employees as demonstrated on the budget amendment, but it would exclude the workers' compensation, UC2B, insurance reimbursement, and the new position.
Okay, I have a question. So that doesn't, we don't have that in front of us and what those costs would be, because the personnel expenditures for, say, all these different funds are mixed. And we have some salary increases, I guess, and some schedule, or some of the percentage increases, and then some other salary increases, and some people that didn't work because the position wasn't filled. Those are all kind of combined in these different line items, right? Like, I mean, we had some vacancies. So in one line item, you might have a vacancy, a percentage salary increase, and potentially other salary increases. So this will all have to be reworked before it comes back to council.
Right. So yes, we have salaries and salary increases in funds other than the general fund. That's correct, because we have positions budgeted in other funds. But, yeah, I would need to divide out those things consistent with the request and then prepare 2 ordinances amending the budget so that you could vote on them separately.
Okay, is that the motion?
Yeah, so let me just make sure that the council members understand. What I'm asking to do is to divide out all of the items that are not related to our bargaining units that currently exist and our non-bargaining units that are under contract with us.
Diane?
Well, I'll support that. I also had a question, if we can identify any merit raises included in this, these budget amendments. And if there are any, where are they?
There's only one that I'm aware of, which was a merit increase that was awarded after the beginning of the fiscal year and before we performed these calculations.
Which one? Where would we find that?
You would find that in the executive department.
I believe that's for the person that does the health insurance and the
Benefits.
benefits for the employees. It's in human resources.
So any other discussion, Charlie?
Okay, if I understand this correctly, then, looking through this, given that if you look through the Exhibit A, there is the insurance reimbursement, that's revenue coming in. Is that in this, which side of the split is that?
What split?
She's saying the AFSCME and non-bargaining unit expenses are
revenue.
one. So that's
Right.
revenue. So where would the?
So the revenue side, that the insurance increased to 42,000, which was, I think, from the claim that was paid out recently.
Right.
Right.
That could go on a separate ordinance or
That would-
resolution.
Okay, so that one's
Yeah,
separate.
That hasn't,
Okay.
that
Well,
has nothing to do
actually, it
with that.
doesn't really matter because all it's
It's
doing is
revenue
going
neutral.
into
Yeah.
the general fund, and it's helping to pay for the raises. That's what it's there for.
Well, let me just clarify, because that doesn't actually pay for these raises. But that item can be listed with any approval of UC2B workers'
Okay,
compensation.
so that's,
insurance.
okay, so
That's what I said.
Okay, so
All of that is separate.
that's one. Okay, then we have the expenditures below that, so that they're all salary adjustments on page 1 here. So those are all salary adjustments, those are all, and then page 2, landscape, U-cycle, economic, home consortium, those are all salary adjustments for the people that work in those areas.
Correct.
So that means that on page 3, big broadband goes to the
Right.
second one. And then on page 4, the insurance claim and then the workers' comp item. So there are 4 items that I can, that,
Well,
New staff member.
right.
And that's combined in the finance department, so I'd need to separate that out
So
as well.
that's sort of a fifth one. Okay, so that's how it would split. So those 5 items would go into the second one, and the first one is all the rest of these items on here. Okay, so now I know what I'm discussing. Thank you.
Eric?
So I have a procedural question, because I had come, as other people here know, with the intention to introduce an amendment by an additional item, a workplace climate study. So I'm not sure exactly how to proceed on that. One possibility would be, if I may suggest the text, that could be included in the packet and then voted up or down, I guess, by the council, if that's a proper procedure. But it looks as though the motion that I was going to amend is being actually broken apart and doesn't exist anymore. So I guess I need.
Introduce that as the third item at the end.
Yeah, I need parliamentary guidance, if I may, on that.
Well, you can make a motion for the preparation of a study, but the other issue is, I mean, paying for it. So,
Right. Yeah. So I actually had prepared an amendment to the fiscal impact, which would simply add, reduce the general fund balance by $5,000 from what it was. So I've got that one lined out and the other one lined in and such.
Mayor Preston.
Well, everybody has their preferences about what they want to add to the budget. And Eric and I have talked. I've suggested to him that if he wants to do a study, the proper time to introduce this would be when we're setting the goals for the next budget, because I think we are in a very tight financial situation. And if people want to introduce a bunch of things, I think we should look at all of them and put them in a priority list instead of having them be introduced one at a time. I think we're in danger of death by addition here. I spend every day trying to look for money for how we're going to pay for these raises, and what you're seeing here is just part of the raises, because we haven't included the fire department and we haven't even settled yet with the police department. So
Mayor.
that's why I'm very concerned about people just coming in and asking to do more things above and beyond what we've already agreed to do in the goals and above and beyond what we already have in the budget.
Mayor, we could debate the issue now, as you have begun to do, but I've simply asked a procedural question, and I guess I'd like to know about that.
in order to fund something that hasn't already been funded, you have to have a budget amendment. So you could have you could make a motion to direct finance to create a new budget amendment ordinance, or you could make a motion to attach another expenditure to the current ordinance.
Okay, so I would like to.
There's a motion on the floor already.
There is a motion on the floor. Okay, so after that motion is done.
Charlie.
Well, I'd like to call the question, which is, as I understand it, it's the motion to split this into the two categories that we've sort of determined now, as I tried to describe them. So I think that's the motion on the floor, and that's one we should vote on so we can take up discussion of the two pieces and then introduce the third one if needed.
Okay, so you don't want to vote on whether to end debate, you just want us to vote. Okay. Is there any other discussion on this? Okay, then we're voting on the motion to divide the question into two pieces. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One. That motion carries.
Okay, and so I would then like to introduce a motion to add to the category that isn't the negotiated increases a workplace climate survey. And the full text of my motion, which I've sent around, but I'll just state for the record. City Council and Mayor Goals 2014-17 Goal 81D states that the city should periodically review and update employee policies and practices to ensure optimal working conditions and effective public service. Since such a review has not been done for a long time, it is timely that this be undertaken now. A preliminary estimate of $5,000 has been made to engage a competent third party to undertake such a survey and provide for anonymity of responses. This can help to guide us in a public review and possible update of our employee policies and practices. We therefore request a $5,000 adjustment to the current budget to be allocated to the Human Resources Department for commissioning such a study, and then the fiscal impact would be $5,000 on the general fund.
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion, a second. Carol.
I'm glad you have a number and a description of it. But just for us who don't know, how did we come to the 5,000? How would that happen?
The 5,000 was done by consultation with Ms. Clark as to what would be reasonable to engage a high-quality third-party provider to do a study. And the judgment is that a third-quality provider to actually implement the study should be done so that the data can be anonymized before it comes back to us, so that employees could respond completely freely.
And did she mention who the vendors would be? Is that local vendor or someone from, or do you have to RFP it, or what do you do with that?
You know, I think my impression, well, you know, I don't know. I actually don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so just so I understand, we voted to divide the question, but
Mhm.
it's not really to divide the question. It's just directing staff to bring us back 2 different amendments.
Well, it is divide the question because you're going to have to
With-
vote on them separately, and I
Tonight,
didn't want the vote.
you want us to vote
Right.
on those separately tonight?
The-
Okay.
the
Okay,
two
then
would
just
be
to divide
voted
the
on
question.
separately.
Okay, and then now we have another motion to amend one of those questions?
Right, yes, to add 2. So one of the 2 items that now we're going to consider separately, one of them is the budget amendment that's necessitated by our obligations to bargaining units, and the other is everything else.
Okay.
So my motion is to append this to the part that is everything else.
Okay. Okay. Dennis?
Yeah, so to speak to that. All right, it seems to me that probably the wisest thing to do is to find out what our obligations are in the larger sense, considering that we have yet an determined, responsibility in as far as wages go with one of our main employee groups. And if we're, and I don't see this being the time to start doing itty-bitty funding allocations to change the city council budget when we don't really know what even the major stones in our way are going to look like. This could be something I could support, maybe in March, when we have a much more sure standing of what we've got to spend and what our priorities are. But the budget really won't be finalized until June, and we're going to have a lot of time to adjust it. I think this is a little premature, and to attach it to what to me looks like kind of like a non sequitur sort of budgetary question just doesn't seem like efficient at the moment. So, I don't mind the thought of doing a study. I think I support that. But to fiddle it in at this point, I think is not the right place to do it. I'd like to see that come closer to the actual budgetary process, building and approval state in the spring.
Carol.
Thank you, and I appreciate Mr. Roberts' statement, because that was the reason why I wanted to divide this in the first place, because there are several items in this memo that are increases in budget line items, like a study for, actuary study to determine funding levels for workers' compensation reserves. So if we can't do a climate study, then that's adding 15,000, not 5, right? So that was the reason why I suggested that we divide this, deal with the wage increases because we have to, and then certainly not add another staff position when we're talking about we don't have funding for our current staff, and add an actuary study, and add a fiscal impact study on employment. And so it's counterintuitive to say we don't have 5,000 but we got 15. We don't have 15,000 but we have another however much the new department person will cost. I think that is where we're really going a little bit awry, and should, at this point, deal with what we must deal with so that we can get real clarity on what our actual revenue will be going forward, and then come back. As you said, a budget amendment can be done anytime once you get your figures and your facts very clear on what your levels are after your tax levy is done. So anything else that is not mandatory for us and not revenue positive, i.e. our insurance payment, we should not be doing at this point. We really should be looking at what we must do, covering our pensions, covering our employees' raises, and hold off until you get your tax levy cleared.
Eric.
So I wanted to again ask attorney, can council members at any time propose budget amendments, or is that must those be introduced by the executive side?
Well, if you're referring to, if there's already an ordinance on the floor, you can vote to amend.
Right.
You can vote to amend the ordinance. So if you're asking if there's no ordinance to amend, you're saying you just want to create one. You can make a motion to direct staff to prepare an ordinance. You can vote on that motion, and if that motion passes, if the city council directs staff to prepare a document, I think that's valid.
Okay.
Any more discussion? Diane.
Well, I think the workplace climate survey should be included and kept in this mix as we evaluate priorities for the everything else pile. I think it's just as important as some of the other things being proposed for the budget amendment. So if we're going to hold off on voting on the everything else pile, I don't want to lose the workplace climate survey option, because I think it's extremely important for our employees to do this. Just as important it is to make sure that they have raises and that their pensions are covered. It's time to hear from employees, let them speak in a way, freely, and address concerns and that sort of thing. So I would put this climate survey absolutely on the same level as everything else that we're being asked to approve. Now, whether we vote on it immediately, whether we hold off, that's for council to decide, but it ought to be the same, given the same priority as everything else in this mix.
Carol.
In the process of dealing with, without an ordinance number, can I call it A for the clerk? Sorry. So the record can reflect that I'm going to call the question on the first separation of this, which is wage increases for ASME and non-bargaining unit employees.
We have a motion. We have Eric's motion.
Right. So we're gonna have to vote. That's what I'm trying to figure out how to.
Okay. If there's no further discussion,
then
we'll vote on first the amendment that Eric made to Part B, that includes everything except for the bargaining unit, non-bargaining unit, and bargaining unit raises. So there's a motion to amend Part B by adding $5,000 for a survey.
It was seconded.
And it was seconded. It was moved by Jacobson, seconded by Marlin. Any more discussion?
Just point of clarity,
Carol.
because this is where I'm asking parliamentary inclusion here. And I agree that the workplace study should be done. I also agree that it should be added to the second part of this. The question is voting on adding it to the second part or the separate ordinance is not necessarily voting for it at this moment, correct? Because I want to make a separate.
You're
Right,
not.
yeah.
The city council is not taking final action at this meeting. These votes are just to make a change in the ordinances, and these ordinances the city council may direct that these ordinances come back for a final vote a week from now.
So
That's correct. You're not taking final action. You're voting to change these ordinances, but you're not passing these ordinances.
Or we're, in this vote, in this very vote, we're not moving it anywhere, we're just adding his.
You're not moving it either. You're just talking about how you'd like to have changes.
Mayor Preston.
You're proposing, I hope, that we're going to wait on all these extra things until we find out what all the wage increases are, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, so if we're ready to vote, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Chair votes aye. That motion carries. Now we're voting on Part A. If there's a what's there a motion to send this
There's
to
no
council?
motion. I'm going to move that we send Part A, which is all of the acceptable AFSCME and non-bargaining unit wage increases, pay increases to council with recommendation for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Moved by Smythe, seconded by Carroll. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. So that completes that item. Is that right?
Okay, so I will make a motion on Part B so that we know what we're talking about here. So Part B now is the following parts. Accepting 42,000 plus as an insurance reimbursement. A big broadband expenditure adjustment of $46,000. The payment, a transfer from the Workers' Comp Reserve Fund of 160? Yeah, 106. Is that what it is? Outside? Is that? There's four different numbers here in this section. Workers' Comp on the last.
The transfer is 150.
150. And then, and that's in the two parts here. Is that, it says 160 here. Transfer to Workers' Comp Insurance Fund, 160, to cover this claim up here.
That may be a typo.
Okay. 106 and 54 adds up to 160.
Well, okay, so just for clarity, what's happening here is we're increasing expenditures in two different lines in the workers' comp fund. Then we're moving 150, or in the insurance fund, then we're moving 150,000 out of the workers' comp reserve fund, which then shows up as revenue in the workers' comp fund where we paid those expenses.
Oh, okay.
It's money moving between funds.
Okay. And so that's, so.
The new position,
And then the new position.
And the merit raise.
And then the what?
The merit increase.
The merit increase, and then the item that was just added.
Yeah,
So there's 6 items.
Okay, so that was a motion for the Part B. Is there a second?
I'm sorry. He didn't say what he said the items, but he didn't say what the motion was.
I'm not sure what the motion should be.
Where you
Send
moving
it
to?
to
That's the question.
council.
Okay, let me
with
just say, those are
recommendation.
the items for discussion.
That's the items
Okay,
for
those are the
discussion.
items for discussion. I guess we need to figure out
Where you
which,
moving?
I guess the idea here would be which one of these we want to send to council now, as opposed to holding them off.
Oh,
So,
I think
yeah.
all of those should be held.
No, I think we have to pay the workers' comp thing, and we need to pay for UC2B.
Yeah, maybe I could help to clarify on those. UC2B, we have contractual obligations that we need to meet. I think that we want to do that.
If you could for next week, because I slightly remember that we did, when I was on the UC2B board, we did increase our allocation to UC2B, but I haven't seen any additional revenue that we need to pay into UC2B, and we haven't seen any paperwork to describe what the additional cost is.
Okay, I'll see what I can find out about that.
Because I know we've done this already a couple months back before I left the board.
Okay.
We increased our.
Okay. I want to say also the workers' comp, paying the workers' comp claim is not optional.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we send these three items to council, since I think they're the insurance reimbursement as revenue in, the workers' comp adjustment as a contractual obligation, the pieces there, and the UCTB budget item, which I think is, again, contractual. I think those are three things that are not optional that we have to pay for. So I would move to send those three items to council with recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Smythe, seconded by Marlin to send those three items separately to council with recommendation for approval. Carol.
Thank you. That poses another parliamentary process for ordinance. We only divided it into two, and you're now going to divide it into three.
I think the only way to make progress on this is to find the pieces that are acceptable and get them off the
I
table.
get it, but I think the process for actual procedural process is that it has to have some ordinance or resolution. And if you do that, we've only divided it into two, which we moved Part A. Part B included all of these items.
I'll move to separate Part
So you
B
have to
into
separate
Parts
them to
B and Part C now, where Part B is these three items that I think are contractual obligations.
I'll second that thought.
You can call the question on that separation.
Okay. I'm not quite sure what we're voting on. Maybe we should just vote on each line separately.
I move to divide the remaining items into two more piles.
Okay.
One pile that are the contractual obligations and the revenue coming in, okay, and the remaining items.
Okay.
And Kurt.
Alternatively, you could attach these three items to Part A.
That's even better. I'll move to attach these three items to Part A. How's that?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Are the people who made all the formal motions until we voted on this one willing to withdraw their motions and seconds? Okay. Except for the ones we voted on. Okay. Now we have a motion to attach these three items that Charlie itemized to Part A. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Now we still have a few left in Part B. Anybody want to try to explain what those are?
I think I know. The merit increase, the new position, and
Was it actuarial study?
The actuarial study
And
and
workplace
the
climate study.
and the workplace
Climate
study.
Okay.
4 items.
So now we have 4 items left on Part B, and is there a motion to send that to council?
No.
No, there isn't.
I just,
Carol.
I wanted to ask when is our, when will we be completed with our levy? So whenever we're complete with our levy, my motion is to move those to a study session right after the levy.
We're planning to have you make your final vote on the levy on December 15th.
Okay, so I guess that would be in the new year.
Yeah, maybe the first
Committee of the
of the
whole.
whole in the new year, yeah.
Okay. Mayor Preston.
Yeah, I thought your intention was to put these things off because they're discretionary until we figure out what more we have to pay on the raises for fire and police. Is that correct?
Yeah, your staff member in finance just told us that workers' compensation claim is not discretionary and it's an obligation.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm
Okay.
talking about the remainder.
Yes, so the remainder.
What's left in item B is discretionary.
Correct.
And that we don't know if we have the money until we really figure out what we have to pay for raises.
That's right. That's why I was going to move them to the next committee of the whole, because you can do whatever you need to do after that point.
Right, but we don't know all we'll know is the fire. We won't know the police yet because we haven't settled with the police.
We won't know them by January.
Well, I hope we do, but right now we've just settled with fire.
Okay, right now there's a motion on the floor to move them to the first meeting of the new year. Was there a second to that?
I don't think so.
Okay, that motion doesn't go anywhere. Anybody else want to make a motion?
No, but I'll make that motion again because, I mean, if we don't have the data, then we can always move it back again.
Well,
But let's, yeah.
how about like this? Move to send this to committee when we have our final numbers, but no later than, say, end of February. Would that be let's set a time
Yeah, that's what
by which we have
So
to
there's a
re-examine
motion
them.
to bring Part B back to committee by the end of February.
Yeah.
So I'll second that, because I think that might give us enough time to actually find the settlement with the last negotiating bargaining team. And then we'll be ready to make a lot of decisions. I mean, I could propose an amendment to an increase or, to increase funds to our sister city committee too, because we're going to have foreign visitors next year and we don't have a budget. So think about all the different things. So, I mean, yeah, I could come up with a lot of key things as well.
Sure.
Okay. Well, let's vote on that. If there's no more discussion, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And we have one item that was added to the agenda for IHSA support. Eric, did you want to talk about that?
Yes, so I would like to, I believe that that we should consider contributing to the a commitment to the Regional Bid Committee for the IHSA tournament, especially, as was noted in public input, since there would be no actual financial expenditure until after presumably we have settled the Carl issue and adjusted in one way or another and adjusted to whatever's going to come of that, and also because it just seems that the potential return is really great, and we wouldn't have to spend the money unless we had the return in hand. So with that in mind, now I do understand that the motion that I sent around earlier had legal opinion that would violate the Open Meetings Act because it would be actually taking an action. So I have prepared a substitute that I believe I hope will be legally acceptable. And my substitute motion is the City Council of Urbana directs the Economic Development staff in consultation with the Champaign-Urbana Regional Bid Committee for the IHSA tournament to make a recommendation to the council for a range of reasonable Urbana contributions to the bid and report back to council on December 1st, 2014.
Second.
I think that range would have to include 0 in order for that to pass muster with the.
Would have to include what?
Would have to include 0. We can't vote on something that would actually obligate
Okay.
any money without.
Does 0 have to be explicit or can that be implicit?
Okay. A range of options.
If you could
this is an action to tell our staff to do something. That takes time and effort. And I would like to say that why don't you just have that committee ask Carl to pay for this? Why does Urbana have to be asked to do this? I just find this accusation that somehow I'm opposed to this because I don't like intergovernmental cooperation to be pretty much of a cheap shot, because that's what I do all day long is intergovernmental cooperation. We can't pay our MetCAD bill, and you're talking about we have to pay this thing because it's going to bring all these benefits that were calculated by the Tourism Bureau. I don't trust their numbers one bit. And I just think you should ask for the people that are getting $10 million more than they used to get. Why does Urbana have to contribute to this? We contribute to all kinds of things, and I don't think we should be asked to do this, and I don't think you should demand that the staff do a study and report to you. I think that's an action, and I think that's a violation of the Open Meetings Act.
I believe that's not a violation. I think that my interpretation of legal counsel is that we can actually direct staff to make a recommendation to us. Am I correct, sir?
Kurt?
You can ask for a recommendation from staff.
Okay. It's been moved by Eric and seconded by Diane. Would you want to read your motion again?
Sure. City Council of Urbana directs the Economic Development staff in consultation with the Champaign-Urbana Regional Bid Committee for the IHSA tournament to make a recommendation to Council for a range of reasonable Urbana contributions to the bid and report back to Council on December 1st, 2014.
Diane?
I would speak to that motion. I think it's not a difficult thing. It probably takes 10 minutes. The suggested levels of donations that were put together by the committee range from $5,000 annually for 5 years up to $20,000 annually. In speaking with the Visit Champaign County staff, I was told they would be willing to work with Urbana for whatever we felt we could contribute. So it's certainly not set in stone. So I don't think it's going to take a great deal of staff time to figure out a reasonable range of contributions. And as to the question why we should do it, for me it's very simple, because a lot of people in Urbana want us to do it. I have come to learn over the past few days how people feel about this tournament and the tradition that it's had in our community and the memories that people have associated with this, and the fact that a lot of people came to Urbana-Champaign for the first time for one of these tournaments, saw the Assembly Hall, saw the University of Illinois, and decided this is where they wanted to be. And people have been coming up to me and saying, we should do this. And sometimes I believe, and not sometimes, I believe all the time, our first job is to represent the people of this community. And this, as I've said many times over the past couple of days, my mouth is dry. This is a relatively small investment which has a large payoff. And yes, we have a terrible budget challenge. Yes, we need to fix the Carl issue, but we can't stop doing things that mean a tremendous amount to the community. And this is one thing that means a tremendous amount, and it's a relatively small amount. And we have time to plan for this. The first payment, if we get the bid, the first payment is not due until fiscal year 16. We can prepare a budget, we can plan for it, and like I said, we can work with the committee. But people believe that Urbana should have something in this bid other than our name on a piece of paper. They want us to have some sort of commitment, and it's their money we're spending, you know? And I believe this is important enough to this city and to the people here that we should put something into it, and it doesn't have to be a whole lot.
Dennis.
This is one of those kind of touchstone kind of emotional topics in the community, all about sports and how much this community will do almost anything for sports and for the Assembly Hall. Now, you wouldn't get this kind of interest for supporting, you know, the Community Center for the Arts or for, you know, perhaps a school education program outreach or something. But if it's going to be for sports, yes, everybody wants to be there, and they want to bring. They want to be winners by bringing this thing which we lost. Urbana didn't lose it. The community at large lost it because Peoria did a better job of making a bid a couple years ago. All right, so I don't think it's really Urbana's job to solve that, considering what the budget we have today is. But but I'm not against participating in. Multi-municipal cooperation. But I think that we're going to have to pick, if we choose to do this, we're going to have to spend the amount of money that we feel comfortable with and not be obligated to donate or delegate, $50,000 a year for 5 years, because that's a lot. Now, so if we have our own choice about what we can do, and and we're not highballing it, maybe I'm open to it.
Well, Charlie.
Yeah. When is our commitment needed by the group?
It actually was November 14th, but I think the application is due by, the bid must be received by the IHSA by December 31st. I mean, we have some time to talk about this, but sorry, may I say something else?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
No one is suggesting $50,000 a year for this. That's preposterous. Maybe even $5,000 is too much for Urbana until we settle the Carl issue. But something from Urbana could send a strong signal to the community and to our residents. So let's just dispel with this $50,000 figure and talk about what Urbana could put in here to at least.
And so the motion is to ask staff to come back with some numbers.
Yeah, what our options are.
Okay, Mayor Preston.
This project can go through without any help from Urbana. Why
Yes,
can't we ask Carl, the people who are now getting $10 million more than they did before, to contribute a reasonable amount to this? They're the ones that have the money. It's Urbana taxpayers who are picking up the tab for this giant business that doesn't seem to care about the community. This would be a nice way for them to show it. So why doesn't the committee ask them? Why don't you include that in your motion? Maybe Urbana can pick it up if Carl refuses.
Carol?
I think the motion that Eric made is reasonable to ask staff to do some work to give us an idea. First I heard of this was in the newspaper. I had no idea what this was, and so I asked my husband about it, and he really described it as a good thing for not only for young people, but he didn't describe it in dollars and cents. He described it in experience. And I think that's a good thing. Can we afford it? We just moved some of these items off because we know we ain't got no money. But can we look at it and see? The truth is we have to say, where are we taking money from in order to do this? And that needs to be considered when staff, when they look at it, they need to look at it in that way. And secondly, I have no idea what the bid is or the bid process or what we're actually paying for, because I've never done this. So I think part of whatever staff does needs to include some picture of what does this mean? How do you bid for something in your community? What are you paying for, you know, as part of your contribution and things of that such?
Okay. Diane?
I think rather than asking staff to do that, the folks from Visit Champaign County or the bid committee would be happy to come and give a brief introduction to what's involved, because that would be helpful, actually. We're talking about estimated $7.5 million in economic impact in the community and 55 to 60,000 visitors, which means people staying in our hotels and eating in the restaurants. And Aaron is exactly right. It's not just about sports, it's about the experience. It's about kids seeing this campus for the first time, some people playing basketball on that court for the first time. But I remember my first visit to this community was when I was a high school freshman. I came down for the state science fair, which was at the Assembly Hall, and it actually hadn't been built for too long at that point. It was the coolest place I had ever seen. I was just awestruck by being in that building. And I came back, and that is part of this. That is why this particular event, unlike many other sporting events, has such a draw. And that's what I've heard the last few days. For people have told me what it has meant to them, and maybe everyone doesn't understand that. But that's why I think people of Urbana want us to say, yeah, we're going to be part of this. And like I said, the committee is whatever we decide that we can do, and maybe we can gradually, we can have a graduated, progressive payment system depending on our Carl situation. But they want us to have something in this.
Charlie?
Yeah, I having been involved in sports tournaments in this town that brought a lot of people to the community, I think it's important that we have a seat at the table, that our name is one of the sponsors in some fashion. And but that doesn't mean we can't ask Carl to help pay for our sponsorship. So I understand that sentiment completely. I agree with that sentiment. But at the same time, I think Urbana does have to have a commitment to this. it is the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign after all. And so having our name in the brochures, in the maps, I think is an important component of this, and it's a small price to pay.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, there's a motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Seeing nothing else on the agenda, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.